Hello and welcome to Power Reflections, a proud member of the Doof Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most unfinished work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And for the fourth year running, I'm Elliot Diebold.
Hey, and we're coming at you live in the Discord. Huzzah!
Huzzah.
But of course, it's a very special. Oh wait, you say this and then I'll lead us into the special
Yeah.
announcement.
Hey, cool. If you're listening to this, the fan art contest shit is due. So if you haven't submitted it in, I guess do it real quick and hope that you're lucky and that we're still checking. Otherwise, if you're a patron, get ready to vote.
Yeah, but of course, it's a very special day today, Elliot. It's the day that episode 3 of season 2 of From has released. We're here to talk about it. Enough about Wildbow and stories like Worm. I care about wild times and people having worms in their arm. That's what we're here to talk about. Let's do it.
Spoilers. We will keep the From talk offline, but there will be a lot of it.
All right, but if you want to petition this show to become a Fromcast, I guess just tweet at us.
It is also the 3-year anniversary of Pale releasing.
What?
I think technically the first chapter released like 3 years and 2 hours ago, or 2.5, because we started late. But
whoops.
Pretty long story.
Shortest ever. Yeah, I mean, it's exciting to be here celebrating the 3-year anniversary of this story. I can't believe it. The Kenneteers were only 13 when we started, and now they're 16. Is that right?
Well, they will be in real life. In the story, we're still only up to like it's still like January 2021. I think they've had a hell of a last few weeks.
What a wild ride, and they've got a few bumpy years ahead of them. I'll tell them that.
Yeah. Well, no, because remember the other verse is a paradise where there's no COVID. Like, this is what I love is for all the horrors.
Paradise, yeah.
But this is the thing, for all the horrors in this universe, I mean, there are some perks.
You would rather, so you're telling me you'd pick the other verse over the this verse?
Yeah. I mean, I probably wouldn't last long, but I'd go out happy probably. Well, actually, probably not that either, but there'd be that small window there where I'd be really happy.
Yeah, there you go. Speaking of people who are really happy, should we talk about our point of view character from this chapter?
Yeah,
he's just having a great time. He's just living the dream. Because we had to talk about 24.A from Teddy's perspective. And oh boy, so Teddy and his gang take the cool new form of fast travel. Roller coaster junkies love this one cool trick. Unfortunately, most of this group does not, and everyone needs a bit of time to recover.
Yeah, and they're all taking antiemetics, which stop them from throwing up. But they're throwing up like bits of animal, bits of glass, like all this other stuff. And part of me is just like
stuff that you definitely want to get out of you.
Yeah, and there's some stuff about how there's protections and it won't harm you sort of if you don't throw it up or whatever. But I just feel like personally I'd still rather get all that shit out of me ASAP.
Yeah, for sure. But I don't know, if we've learned anything about the Negatiers, is that they like to internalize and keep around all the horrible inside shit that they shouldn't, right? Like, I do think it's kind of funny that this chapter is Teddy thinking about, I want to make myself actively worse. And it starts with them fighting to keep all that horrible black shit inside themselves. Like, it is kind of an explicit metaphor for them.
Yeah, I hadn't picked up on that, but you're right. I think you've hit the nail on the head with that for sure, or nailed the hammer on the head, as
nailed the
other
hammer on
people
the
would
head.
say.
Yeah, as everyone says.
Actually, speaking of people saying dumb shit that's wrong, Teddy, like when he's describing this horror transportation, he's talking about how the lines are all merging. He's like, oh yeah, they all went near the horizon point. And I'm like, Teddy, you dipshit. They're called vanishing points. That was the arc title in this story for arc 8. Like,
what a loser.
But then part of me, like, because I saw that, I was like, okay, Wildbow definitely knows their vanishing points because he named an arc that. So then I was like, is this something? And then, I don't think it is. I don't know if it's anything more than just a funny little joke, but I just thought it was funny that like it's such a niche thing to talk about, and like Teddy just gets the name of it wrong when it was an arc title. It has to have been like an on-purpose joke.
A joke about how Teddy's an idiot.
I guess, yeah.
Speaking of Teddy being an idiot, you've called out how he points out that there are two of the Kims that are fraternal twins.
Yeah,
This has got to be Teddy just not being aware of how the Kims are horror clones, right? Because
but
there's a
then
later point in the chapter where he points out someone who I think he says like, "Oh, could be Helen or maybe a younger cousin," and presumably is a horror clone of Helen.
oh, see, but no, there's one point where he's like, oh, it's like Helen clones or something. Yeah, like we haven't seen any of these Kim limbs that
Limbs
have.
is a very funny word, but yeah.
Yeah, none of the other Kim limbs have been like a different gender or like noticeably different people, like presentation wise, I guess. And then also they all have their own chopsticks. I feel like only OG Helen has chopsticks. Maybe I'm wrong.
Mm.
I don't know. I did one of that too. Whether this was like meant to be like, is this some cool Kim cousin who like has different gendered limbs or something? I don't know.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe. Maybe. I don't know. I just kind of assumed they were horror clones. I didn't think too much more from it.
Well, I guess I just thought it was interesting because if they are twins, like there's a really low success rate for the kids in this family. Like we saw that in Helen's interlude, but I
Mm.
could see it being an advantage if you have a twin. I
Mm.
mean, we just had Marissa talking to death about how her and Brisbane could do all that sick communication because they like grew up together and shit. So like I could see twins actually having drastically better odds because they can sort of grow up together and like help each other through the ritual.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't
which,
know.
yeah,
Anything where the Kims move towards positive structural change makes me suspicious because I just don't think they have it
that's
in
fair.
them.
Well, I mean, this is more Kims going through the Kim machine. I wouldn't really call that a positive thing. Even if they come out of it as a success, I still don't see it as a positive.
Yeah.
I also really like Teddy is really dismissive. Like he's not a fan of the Kim aesthetic and their style. Like he's talking about how they look like shitty runway models. And it's like usually you see runway models dressed up in stupid crap, and it's like, oh, but these are the people they're selling that stupid crap to. Like you look ridiculous.
Mm.
And then he's interrupted from this thought as he's like dunking on their style because one of them has to point out that like while he's high on the abyss, he's grinning him like he's stretching his cheeks so much that drool is just falling out of his mouth.
Mm.
And so I just like the hypocrisy of this dude sitting there unknowingly, literally drooling because he can't keep his face in check, and he's sitting here making fun of how these two look. It was just like like this is our introduction to Teddy. Really, is like this is a kid who just has one foot out of reality. Really, he's a bad judge of character, and it's like I just love this idea that he's walking around thinking about how shit everyone else looks, and he can't even keep his own spit in his mouth.
Mm. Yeah. He must look horrible right now.
Yeah,
But the outside matches the inside because he is horrible. So
I don't. I just mostly feel sorry for Teddy. He's an idiot. He's not.
I don't
Yeah,
know. I I kind of could have felt sorry for him at the start of the chapter, but this whole chapter to me is Teddy constantly being offered a way to back down and him constantly fighting against it and kind of
yeah,
actively choosing, no, I want to be shittier. You know what I mean? Like he's desperate to try and be shittier.
yeah. But I think we see why, and I don't know how much I blame this 15-year-old dumbass kid for this environment he's ended up in.
Mm.
We can get there as he gets more into it. I just want to call out that we get notes on how everyone is kind of coping with their stomachs being full of I don't know
Stuff.
yeah,
Milk,
random collection
whatever.
of shit.
Yeah.
And Seth is like coping with it the worst so far, and poor Cameron's having to take care of him. And it's all just the stuff of like even Teddy's sort of like, well, yeah, because Seth didn't really actually have to deal with being forsworn, and it's just like a good reminder, I think, for us that it's like, oh yeah, like the Alair forsworn, they're doing fine with this because like they've dealt with worse, whereas like Seth actually had a pretty cushy forswearing. Like
Mm.
he acts real hardcore, and like he's super on like Charles' side. It's like all things considered, he had it pretty soft.
Mm. Yeah. um, Seth's a loser. He's just the worst,
Yeah, I
right?
know. Hopefully, he's still dealing with some spider bite related nonsense.
Yeah.
Uh, Speaking of Cameron too, so we get this thing where kind of everyone has their own interpretation of what the universe looks like as you're being horrified, teleported through it. And I'm not sure I fully understand Teddy's, but I love how just straight up Cameron's is, where she's like, I think that the universe's underlayer looks like a collapsing box with jagged edges, an Iron Maiden. And it's just like, Cameron, even you have to see how much that screams, help me, I'm trapped. Like, because as Helen said, this is like you're looking in the clouds. It's like you're projecting your subconscious onto what you're seeing. And Cameron's subconscious is telling her she's trapped in an Iron Maiden. Like,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
Again, the negatives like to think they're very smart and deep, but they're
Yeah,
they're
they're
not as hard to
teenagers.
read as they think. Yeah.
Teddy's one is interesting though. So he sees like the kind of the universe as a snake, and then they're this like discarded bit of used skin, which like I guess implies some stuff about feeling like discarded, useless, not a part of the universe or something. I don't quite fully get it. Like it didn't click for me, but like I just guess I get a general vibe of like feeling useless and discarded.
Mm, yeah. I don't know. Maybe it was. I kind of. I think the way Helen read it was that it was about transformation and change. But I think you're right that for Teddy it was kind of like being a husk, an empty husk.
Well, I mean, the Kennedys are trying to change the world, and they're leaving shit like him behind. So maybe he's just subconscious is telling him to switch sides.
Yeah.
Also, yeah, can we talk about Helen? Because she has this bit where she like intentionally prods her family, and it's really funny because they're like telling her to shut up, and she kind of keeps going. And it's like, actually, Helen, you do have a history of fucking up your family's practice by talking, so like, fair. But she gets really excited that like she uses the term "we" to describe the family, and they don't call her out on that, which is like seen as a
Yeah.
sign of acceptance back into the
That's
family by
she's
her.
almost gleeful about it.
Yeah, which is just creepy from Helen to be happy about stuff. I don't like that.
Helen being creepy? I don't know
No,
about that.
but also like because I guess we had a Helen interlude a few arcs ago, and I very much came out of that with the vibe that she was getting ready to like fuck her family over, like,
Mm.
and like now I'm wondering, is she happy because being reintegrated into the family is step one in that plan, or does she want to get back with her family? Because that's kind of tragic if so.
I mean, she might be telling herself a different version of the truth, which is just that
Yeah.
she's probably been stuck in a pattern of looking for her family's approval for a long time, and it's kind of now that that's convenient for her to fall back into, or easy for her to fall back into, she will. I don't know.
Yeah. Not unlike a certain Carmine who seems to be falling into the patterns of the society he's trying to replace. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm very curious to see where Helen goes, I guess, because I kind of got the vibe she wanted to fuck her family over, but now it's kind of interesting either way. If she is stabbing her family in the back, I can get behind that. If she's not, that's kind of sad and tragic in its own way and should be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, but yeah, so the gang here gets caught up to by some other Kennet found citizens who kind of still want to fight, and Teddy kind of runs through his gear before he jumps into the fray.
Yeah, and he's got like such cool gear. Like this is the one part of the chapter where I was really like
Mm.
excitedly team Teddy. Like I especially like he's starting to gather this little card collection, and they're all so cool. I love the one that makes goblins out of weapons. Like that's a really fun, kind of obvious in retrospect idea.
Yeah,
The other ones are a lot dicier to use, in my opinion, but still like it's a cool collection to be starting.
yeah, um, yeah. It's very cool. It's kind of, I mean, so Verona also is a card collector, which means the final showdown of this story is getting closer and closer to being a Yugi versus Seto Kaiba esque card duel, and I'm just very, I don't know, the idea of magic decks of cards is just always very fun. Like I just think
Yeah.
that's always delightful.
I mean, I don't think either of them can compete with Anthem though.
Well, yeah.
But yeah,
Okay, so we've got Teddy, Verona, Anthem. Are there any other card
I mean,
magic practitioners? I don't know.
not in this story.
Sure, yes. Um, so who maps to who? Which Yu-Gi-Oh characters map to these
Oh, I
three?
see. I mean, Anthem has got to be Kaiba, right? Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um,
Is Verona?
Teddy.
Oh yeah.
Teddy's the kid with the bug deck. I don't remember his name.
Yeah, I want to say his name's like Wilfred or something, you know. Oh no, it's Weevil. It's Weevil something.
Weevil
Yeah,
Underwood. That's it. Yeah, yeah.
that's it. And I would kind of put Verona as Yugi. I feel like
Yeah.
Verona has the Yugi vibes.
Does that make Gillette yummy?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
But yeah,
Anyway.
anyway, no, I actually really like that comparison to Verona because I think there's like even more to dive into there because like he's the other side of his practice, what is ostensibly Teddy's practice, is alchemy,
Mm,
which is like
yes.
one of Verona's other main
Yeah.
specialties,
Yeah.
as much as
True.
her sorcery has a specialty. Like
That's
again,
a
it's just
fun
one of those
parallel.
moments. Yeah, it really highlights how shit Charles's system is because Verona's had this flexibility to explore and dabble and like gravitate towards alchemy, whereas like Teddy only considers alchemy as a thing really when Joseph is around, and it's like because that's his job. Like he's clearly gravitating towards this collection stuff. He has this unhealthy obsession with the abyss. But it's like alchemy doesn't actually seem to be his thing. He doesn't really care for it. He's kind of forcing himself to do it, and like I mean, this is the story of the Negatiers in a nutshell, really. But I think like that overlap with two of Verona's primary practices is probably very intentional. You're right.
Mm, yeah.
It
I
also
think
it
it's a.
also made me think of Toadslow because he specifically
Mm,
calls himself out as like Mariska wanted him to be a trickster,
mm,
and that's always been Toadie's word. Like he also always packs on him like a bunch of items that he can use for nefarious means.
mm,
So I don't really have a second part to this thought. I thought it was interesting how much I guess Toadie would be a better mentor for Teddy because like Toadie's actually kind of a trickster himself and also has
mm,
that same sense of humor. I think. I don't know.
yeah.
I wonder if there's
Yeah.
a mapping of the original Negatiers to the original Kennet others. If Teddy is Toadie,
Well, their
it's too
names
late
are
for that.
pretty close.
Yeah, too late for that thought. Anyway.
That's the kind of in-depth insight I bring to the table.
um, Also, I love this fight is against this numbered mask foundling,
Yes.
which is just like classic. It's classic Lost bullshit that it's like, oh, this person is the mask. Like as long as the mask survives, they survive. It's like the mask thing was already the theme of Kennet Found, and they like subvert their own theme like straight away. Like Lost shit's so crazy. I love it.
Mm, yeah. I think it's funny. It's like a mirror of the Black Scalpel almost. It's just a classic monster
Oh, I
vibe.
like that. Yeah.
A lot of parallels in my analysis of this chapter
Mm.
so far.
Yeah, no, I like them. It's all shit I missed. I guess getting into the Abyss, which is Teddy is very pro Abyss in this chapter. He has this moment with Leonard where basically because he misses his first shot, and he's sort of like, "Oh, how do I aim this thing?" And Leonard's like, "No, we don't do that here. Like, guns are bad practice. They teach you to aim. I just want you to like, I guess, just fucking shoot so
Yeah.
wide that it hits
Close your eyes and
everything."
pull the trigger.
And I mean, I think there's a lot to talk about with the Abyss and how it's used and what it sort of means in this chapter. But like, I love this for sort of establishing a thing around the Abyss where it's like it's not targeted. Like, I think this overlaps a bit with the whole seeing black versus seeing red stuff. Like, the Abyss doesn't make them or push them in a certain direction. It just seems to like dampen all their emotions and make you like blanket
Mm,
deadly. And that's sort of what Leonard is spruiking here as well. He's like, don't focus on a specific target. That's seeing red, see black. Just shoot everything.
mm, yeah. Yeah. Uh, I don't know. This is an example to me of this is where Teddy is continuing to make the choice to go down his, I don't know, black path, you know?
Sure, but you got to be a bit softer on him doing that while he's high on drugs, essentially. Um,
Well,
Drugs that he
yeah.
chose to talk, but he's 15 or whatever. Like, I can't.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, like, he actively chose to put himself in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. He's a kid though. Like, I don't know, and it's just like
Yeah.
he's
I'm
trapped
not
here.
saying
Like,
he
I mean,
deserves to be put to death or anything, but like he deserves ramifications for his choices.
I'm sure Lucy would agree with you, but I don't know. To a certain point, in my head, it's like Charles and Mariska's fault more than his. Like the whole thing with his parents kind of shows he doesn't see himself as having a choice, really. Um,
I think it's worth judging people on their intentions as well. You know, like do you have good intentions or bad intentions? And I don't see him caring about changing the world for the better. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, to be fair, again, he's high on Abyss for most of the chapter, which makes it hard to dig into
mm,
that. But also, like again, he's making those decisions, for want of a better term, like under duress. So, like, kind of got tricked into being on this side, and now feels like he can't escape. So he's, this is my life now. He's not gleefully doing it. Whereas like Kira Lynn, I'm a little bit more on your side because like she's just a fucking maniac.
mm,
Whereas Teddy feels more like a kid who got in too deep before he could realize it. Now he's just like trying to cope.
yeah, yeah. I don't know.
Um, Like I guess to this is sort of a tangentially related point, but like because there is this whole bit where like Leonard is actually quite nice to them here, and Teddy like sort of thinks to himself, yeah, sometimes Leonard seems like a good guy and he's a good teacher, and then other times he's just this weird violent monster, and like what could be causing that? Like as he's sitting there, he also high on the abyss, and it's just like the drug metaphor is sort of just there for the taking. Like it's like this is the thing with Teddy's. I feel more sorry for him than I do hold him to account because he's just clearly like a fucking idiot. Like, and he just is a terrible judge of character.
Mm,
Which is why I think it's fun that he's paired with Joseph, and we can get to that in a bit. But like, yeah, like things like this Leonard moment where like how this kid hasn't really put together that like what the Abyss stuff is doing to him might overlap with Leonard's wild mood swings and just general shittiness is beyond me.
yeah. Yeah. I don't know. There's they're just so not self-aware, which I guess makes sense because they're
Yeah.
Charles's gang. But like, come on.
I mean, yeah, we were joking in my live read that it's like this kid could be in a red flag factory and he wouldn't notice. Like he'd just see black flags, I guess.
He's like,
Like
oh, pirate cosplay. I'm interested.
and I guess this is why I don't hold Teddy to as much account as someone else because like from my perspective in his head we just seem like an idiot who fell in with the wrong crowd and got kind of coerced into doing this stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, so Teddy pops off trying to murder a foundling, but gets disappointed when it turns out he didn't and tries to go on a bit of a murder rage. Luckily, his mentor is here instead to help him deal with trauma and talk about healthy coping strategies.
So he does kill a foundling here. I think you're thinking of the wrong incident. This is the part where he does. He
Oh, yeah.
explodes a whole person.
Yeah, yep. I was thinking of when he was blasting the mask,
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
mask foundling.
No, this is a unnamed teenager who he just full. I mean, there's so much great detail here. I love the muscles are still twitching. The blood is melting the snow, which is one of those bits of Canadian color I wouldn't have thought of, but totally makes sense. Like this is grisly as fuck.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, Teddy just full dissociates.
Yeah, I mean, like, he goes on a bit of a little bloodlust and then kind of freaks out for a bit, which is good, as he should.
Well, this is the part he's like the abyss is starting to wear off, but it kind of hasn't fully yet. So he can't quite feel his feelings. So I guess he just sort of loses track of time as his body's kind of stuck in this loop of not being able to feel feelings, but standing over these bits of corpse that he just exploded and not being able to process that without
Mm,
going through the emotional trauma of I exploded a guy. Yeah. And I
yeah.
mean, like this is the fun thing about like the abyss as a drug because I'd kind of forgotten, but when we were originally introduced to the abyss, it was next to the ruins, and it was like the ruins is for recycling immaterial stuff, and the abyss recycles material stuff.
Mm,
Um, and so like the idea that the abyss juice kind of makes you less emotional kind of makes sense because it's like if you're taking abyss juice, it's kind of like taking anti ruins juice, like you're
mm,
dampening down the immaterial part of yourself, like which
yeah.
Teddy starts to call his humanity, which he should reflect on a little bit more. But like, I, I love this idea that like as a drug, it does make sense in universe that this results in you just dampening your emotions because you are suppressing the ruins part of yourself and just amplifying your visceral part.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, it'll make sense.
Yeah.
I just am like, it's just like so clearly wrong, right? Like fundamentally capital W wrong. like Teddy, I don't know, like it's like depressed talk from Teddy, right? Like
Yeah, well, he's
he's
coming at
here
this.
wanting to tune out his emotions, I guess.
Yeah, well, he's coming at this from the perspective of he doesn't have a choice. He has to be in this war. He can't be disloyal because he's seen what happens. So it's sort of like for him, he's like, I'm going to have to be a murderer who kills people. The only way I can cope with that
Mm,
is to turn to drugs, which is just sad. Like, yeah, I don't know.
yeah.
I do think it is very, very interesting though that like as we really dive into the abyss as a drug, like talking about that whole it makes you see black, not red.
Mm,
And I think a bird pointed this out in my live read. That's very interesting considering we're on Team Carmine here. Like it's making them see the sable's color, not the carmine color. Um,
mm,
Again, I don't really know exactly what that means, but like I do think it's interesting that Charles, even on his own side, isn't necessarily turning them into a Carmine crew. Like he is fine with the Abyss, even though it's seemingly not necessarily directly as Carmine related in this metaphor, at least.
mm, yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, I guess interesting. Like the fact that it's dampening their anger and as an emotion. I don't know. Like,
Yeah,
is that something that is exploitable or a weakness in the setup here? Like, I don't know.
yeah, it's a good question. I guess I'm just really stuck on what the imagery of Charles not necessarily making his kids see red, but making them see black.
Mm,
It really speaks to him as a summoner. He just wants them to be upgraded. He doesn't care how. I guess I don't know. Like this makes them
mm,
more ruthless and efficient, but I guess it makes them maybe a bit more sable. I don't know. I don't
mm,
really. Yeah, it feels like there's something here. I'm not quite putting the piece of the puzzle together that Wildbow's given us.
mm. Yeah.
I'd also like again, just speaking of Teddy being an idiot, he has this moment where he thinks, with the abyss running through him, he was humorless, which was weird because humor was a big part of his identity.
Doesn't
And just,
warrant further thought, I don't think.
I mean, I guess he can't right now, but it's just like again, just another one of those moments of just a negative being like just popping up a red flag for themselves and then
Yeah.
not noticing
And
it.
then completely ignoring it. Classic stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the other comparison that jumped to mind, and I think I want to make these sorts of comparisons a lot as we get towards the end of this chapter, but it's hard not to view Marisica as the sort of supplier for these kids and their abyssal drugs. Like especially because Kira Lynn was the first dealer within the crew, and she was
Mm,
Marcy Junior. But like one of the comparisons that jumped out to me was like Avery and her check marks that she got from Guillermo, and it's just like just a little detail of like, Guillermo gave Avery those check marks and they helped. That was like, a happy good time drug that reinforced the best parts of herself and has only been a positive thing. Whereas Marisica's got these kids on the abyss. It's just like another win for Guillermo and another loss for Marcy, really.
mm, yeah. Which is good. Even
Yeah.
from beyond the kind of sort of grave, Marcy is still shit.
Yeah. I mean, Guillermo's behind his own grave of a kind too, I think.
Mm,
Yeah, speaking of Marisica, I'm very interested to see where we go with Kira Lynn here. There's some fun seeds being laid because she's always kind of been, Marcy Jr., Marcy's biggest fan. Like, the Snowdrop's tiny fan of Marisica. I'm very interested to see how her. I almost get the vibe she wants to try and replace Marisica, which could lead to a very interesting dynamic between her and Charles. Because I think
mm,
Charles and Marisica had a relationship where I think Marisica was always kind of a little bit on top, really.
mm,
Kira Lynn, I don't think will have that same option. Um,
mm.
so I'd be interested to see her trying to replace Marcy and Charles seeming to let her because she can't as long as, she always starts so much his junior.
Hmm. Yeah. Interesting. I yeah, there's a moment in this chapter where Teddy almost thinks that Kirillin is like grieving, right? Like, but she's
Mm,
still kind of juiced up, so
yeah.
isn't. um yeah, I don't know. I guess it'll be interesting to see like
I just like because Kierlin was so obsessed with not being average and like trying to be as cool as possible. And like that was a big part in my head, at least, of why Marisica was her idol. And now I can't help but think that, like, as angry as she is about Marisica being gone, there's also going to be part of it that's just like going to want to step into that slot now that it's open, I guess. Like, in a way
hmm,
that in her head would be honoring Marcy, not just necessarily replacing her, but it's just like that's, I guess, Kierlin's whole vibe of just, I see her kind of wanting to use this to improve herself because that's how she'll emotionally cope with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, yeah, I don't know. That just Charles like will be all about that because he loves people who are trying to change themselves to quote unquote improve.
Yeah. Improve. Yeah. Let's talk about Donny, shall we? Because
Dead
this
Dad
is the
Donny.
reason. Dead Dad Donny, everyone's favorite character. This is the reason that Teddy is really going off the deep end, right?
It takes him
Um,
so long to like acknowledge it. Like he's about halfway down from his high before he finally allows himself to have the thought.
Well, yeah, because we get this thought near the start of the chapter where he thinks Donny had killed his dad. Donny had killed his dad because the abyss ran through him and changed him into someone more vicious, like this kind of stuff. And then I think this happens once more, or maybe it's the next time it comes up when he thinks, you know, I had told him that
Yeah.
that his dad might be a fake or whatever, right? And so Teddy is clearly and rightfully blaming himself for Donny's father, for Donny killing his father. And it's just crazy. I mean, it's such a great gut punch to build up that
Yeah.
they had gone so far that Teddy was able to easily convince Donny to shoot and kill his dad. It's just fucked. I love it.
It's a great revelation of like, oh, Teddy is so much worse than I realized. Like, it's like, oh, like we knew he was in a bad spot, but it's like, oh, also it's his fault that Donnie's dad is dead. Like, that's a huge escalation on like how fucked up Teddy has been by the recent events.
Yeah.
Also, sorry, I want to talk about Joseph while we're here because this is that part where Teddy just full on dissociates, and Joseph is the one who kind of comes and gets him and makes sure he isn't left behind. And this is kind of our first chance at actually seeing Joseph in action, I think. And I'd call him the Sylvia of Charlie's Angels, I guess. Like he gives me this vibe of somebody who just like, doesn't do morals, I guess. Like just the way he interacts with and talks about Teddy, he's just interested in the science of alchemy, I guess is how I describe it. Like,
yeah.
There's never a question of, like, do you want to do, like, is it healthy? Like, because Teddy has these things where he's like, I want to dive deeper into the abyss because blah, blah, blah. And Joseph only talks to him about practicalities. Like, there's no, oh, are you okay? It's like, Joseph is not somebody who is an emotional support, I don't think. Like, he's just somebody, he just likes his science stuff and he will just, that worst kind of, I guess, amoral scientist, like amoral in the sense he does not consider morals.
Yeah.
Which is, the worst kind of support for Teddy to have right now.
Well, yeah, definitely not needed for Teddy, but kind of a fun vibe for a mentor.
I mean, it's just a whole fresh new way to have a shitty mentor for the Negatiers, which I thought we might have run out of by now, but, Walbo finds a way.
Yeah. But yeah, so the group is interrupted by a bunch of Aware, including Figueroa, and they pick up some bad karma before they get moving again. Now, this was Murder Truck, right? You kind of didn't put it in the notes, but there was a truck mentioned and there was some Sergeant's Hall Aware here, so it had to be Murder Truck. Why would Wabo mention a truck and the Sergeant's Hall Aware if our favorite character, Murder Truck, wasn't making an appearance?
But we've seen Figueroa's truck before.
Figueroa's truck probably got murdered by Murder Truck, right? No, was Figueroa the one who was bad at parking?
Yes, yeah,
cool.
Which is like, I didn't remember his name. Like, I definitely had to look that up, but it's like, the like no fat chick sticker, which just fucking ugh, was on his car. I remember that from 5.A.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, I think Crawford's right. I think the Murder Truck is above having that sticker on it. Like,
sure.
The murders, that's fine. The sticker, no.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry. In this section as well, we also get a mention that a Fae, who was Marisica's friend, has joined their contingent. And, like, smart money, this is probably Brisbane, her, brother, who's joined them after the events of 23.Z. But my first thought, for some reason, before I remembered Brisbane was around, was that, like, Marisica's friend in the past has been Finia. And I was like, fuck, it'd be funny if Finia was back for some reason.
Yeah, that would be fun. A fun twist. There's no way Finia was Mariska's friend, though, right? Like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's what friendship is to a Fae, but they didn't seem
I was about to say
friendly.
the concept of friendship in the Fae comes with a lot of like
Yeah, with a lot of
caveats.
caveats. Yeah.
But I think she was explicitly called out as her friend in like 11.z or something. Anyway, so it's probably Brisbane. That's smart money, and I think that makes more sense for a lot of reasons. But Finia would be funny. We also see the Aurum here, and I really like. What's the deal with the Aurum? Because I still am somewhat clinging to that little tinfoil I had that the Aurum might not be a baddie.
Yeah, it was a weird little cameo, wasn't it, in this chapter?
Well, and it just, I guess, because especially because we've done the the recap for the anniversary that we'll get into here. I'm still sitting here, and every time Ryan comes up, I'm still just thinking, what was this personal question that got answered for him at the end of 19.z? Like, I still feel like there is a shoe waiting to be dropped from this guy, and I just am running out of ways to see it as anything helpful.
Yeah.
I want to believe in the Aurum, because there was that whole thing with the Aurum being a coil, and coils fuck over people running corrupt games, and part of me is like, so maybe he's targeting Charles as well as the practitioners, and he's kind of a goodie. It's getting harder and harder to cling to that hope.
Yeah. I think probably not. I mean, like, Goody even would not apply this anymore, right? Like, he's been a party to too much horrendous shit now.
Yeah, but that's how coils operate. I don't know.
It would have to be a pretty big twist, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I just like, part of me is like, I think we're still waiting for this shoe to drop around his personal question, and part of me is just like, I hope the Aurum has been playing something in the background, and it's all part of his long con.
Yeah.
Very long con, unnecessarily long con, I would call it.
Yeah. But yeah, so they're just outside Toronto and they start setting up their new base. The Kims unfold their Ant-Man style house, the Alairs start to do some glamoring, and Charles erects the same shitty cabin he always hates.
Seriously, I wrote that part out because it's just so funny. We've been in Charles's head. We know that he hates this cabin, and yet he's still doing it. Like,
why? God.
I mean, that's Charles, right? Like,
yep. Yeah. I mean, it is. It is.
It's also like Teddy has this thought where he's like, yes, the Carmine likes to be a bit away from civilization. It was like, Charles clearly hasn't fucking read Pact, because I feel like one of the biggest things this story has been nailing into our heads is like, isolation bad. You need to be a part of your community and like experience diversity. Like, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's part of how it's like how that point is made, right? Is by showing us just how much a horrible life Charles lives.
Yeah, well, it's just that thing, because like, I still have faith that Charles is cooking more than we've seen, and we can talk about that at the end of the chapter. But like, it's really hard not to just come down on him for being all the worst parts of the people he's replaced. And Malia and I talked about this a little bit on Pale in Comparison last week. But like one of the big ones is Charles has given Eloise's family Toronto, which was what Musser had agreed to do with them. So he kept up that part of Musser's deal, which is like, great. What a dick. The way he gathers and collects all these people reminds me of Bristow a bit. And then obviously, like, setting up this remote community where nobody really trusts each other is also very Bellinger and Alexandria with all the strays. It's just like, it feels like he picks all the worst part of the other BHI headmasters and takes those bits on. And it's just like, Charles, you're making it really hard for me to have your back.
Yeah. Which I'm kind of worried that was even on the cards, Elliot, but all right.
I mean, I'm never going to say Charles is right, but it's like, at the very least, it was like, his cause, it was that thing, like, we agreed with his general sentiment of fuck the practitioner establishment. It was just, we disagreed with how he was doing it. And the more he shifts into seemingly just becoming the practitioner establishment, the more he loses the one good thing about himself. And so this is why I'm clinging to this idea that it's like, no, he's still doing that. He's just planning another big sneak attack. Because it's like, no, the one thing Charles had going for him was that he was doing the right thing the wrong way. And I don't want him to lose that, because then there's nothing saving this dude.
I guess. Yeah. Can we talk about the most tragic part of this chapter, I guess, the real low point, which is these interactions with horsemen?
Oh, sorry, you've skipped.
Oh, did I skip I skipped a bit. Sorry, I skipped a bit. So yeah, Teddy is kind of in the mansion trying to get some sleep or just anything, and instead freaks out and has a panic attack.
Um,
uh,
I love all the horror artwork in this house. Sorry, before we get to Teddy's,
yeah.
panic attack, I just love the house. Like the Kims really lean into their aesthetic, and like, I mean, it's a lot, but it's cool. Like, the fucking Adams Family wish. Like, I was just picturing the Adams Family house, basically, but with
Mm,
like horror. It sounded like AI artwork on the wall, basically,
mm,
like extra fingers and shit.
yeah. It's kind of funny. It's a fun vibe. It's like a horror haunted house. It's cool.
The Kims are just so over the top. I kind of
They
love how
are.
much they
They are.
lean into it.
Yeah, it's fun. It's good that they're over the top. It's much better than if they weren't over the top and
Oh
still
yeah.
were as psychotic.
Well, I
Makes
mean,
them more fun.
this is the thing about the other verse, right? Is it like in this universe you get rewarded for doing shit like this? Like that's like having an aesthetic like this and stuff gets certain spirits really on board with you. Like yeah, it's fun. I just love that this is a universe where it's like there's actually probably a reason that they lean into it so hard.
Yeah.
Also, in the midst of this panic attack setting on, Teddy does think to himself, like, well, he has, this is where we first realize that his feelings for Kira Lynn are maybe a little bit more than just wanting to be friends. But I really like, there's no, even with the abyss inside of him, there's not really lust as a part of this. Like, he talks about wanting to be held and to hold, which is kind of visceral and physical, but like, there's nothing I don't know, sexual about her. Like Teddy just seems to really like Kira Lynn for who she is as a person, and like wants her as like a partner emotionally, which is just so tragic because fucking get some taste, dude. Like seriously, this is a
Mm,
terrible crush to have. But also, I don't know, it's like kind of wholesome that he just likes her for her. Like that makes it even more tragic.
mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
what was putting out in the chat, like as Horseman points out, maybe it's because he needs a mum more than a girlfriend right now. But
Yes.
like, yeah, um,
Yeah, I did like it when Horseman called that out for him. Oh, Horseman, you
what
did your
Horseman says
best.
it in that very like soldier jokey way of like, don't get those confused. It gets weird,
Yeah.
like almost sounding like he's speaking from experience, which I assume he isn't. But like, yeah,
No, I mean, what
fun
experience would
vibe.
he have?
Maybe one of the because he's built up out of a lot of people, and if one of them had a weird thing going on that made its way into him, like
Mm, yeah. Um, but yeah. So then Teddy kind of continues his spiral. He almost is pulled out of it by an Alair practitioner before he kind of shoots that down. And then climbs up to the roof, and Horseman tries to talk him down.
yeah, and I loved going on this ride that the story and Teddy both took us on of like he does the thing where he's like, I'm having a panic attack. He's like, that's okay. I know how these work because I've seen them on TV. I just
Mm,
need to find somebody who will walk me through it. And then he finds, this, cute girl who's wearing a nice, bright dress. And it's like, it's just heavily coded as like, this is exactly the sort of comforting presence he needs right now. And he just completely fucks it up.
mm.
Um, and it just like I got my hopes up when he saw her. I was like, yes, this is just what he needs, and maybe she'll be
Yeah.
nice and better than Kira Lynn, who was a terrible crush to have. And like it's all going uphill, and then just watching it crumble before our eyes was hilarious.
Yeah, it was very fun. Oh man. And yeah, then the horseman scene, which is like tragic because yeah, I mean there are
Oh
probably a few times where Horseman is a bit too kind of tactical, but he really is just trying to I believe him that he's really just trying to have this kid not end up killing himself or something horrible
oh yeah,
happening. Like it's a win-win for if Teddy becomes more of a human being. But
but no,
not
it's like
he just won't.
yeah, it's absolutely no accident that the only genuine halfway decent attempt by anybody to actually take care of Teddy is the fucking imprisoned Kennet citizen, right?
Yep.
Like the dude who's literally bound to basically fuck off what he tells him to, manages to find a way not to leave this kid when everybody else left at the first drop of a hat. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, this story's not subtle about how it's drawing out the differences between Kennet and the Negatiers.
Yeah, it's a really nice moment that is absolutely ruined by Teddy.
Yeah. And like, but like
uh,
again, Horseman feels like Lucy in that way. He just holds his kid to account. Like he's like, hey, if you call your mom, don't let her hear that you're the sort of guy who says that thing about the gun. That was fucking ugly. Like that was the thing where it was
Yeah.
like he did not need to say that, but he did need to say that.
Yes, yes. I mean, it would have
Um,
probably been better for him if he hadn't, but he
Yeah.
still called out Teddy
Yeah.
on the shittiness of what he was
Yeah.
doing.
This is a guy who's been hanging out with Lucy, definitely.
Yeah.
Could we talk about the Alaire practitioners though before we move
Sure.
on from this section? What is up with the like? First of all, this girl is like, I don't like being called the Alaire practitioners. And I was like, you know what? Very fair. Like, unlike everybody else who's weirdly idolizing and sucking Alexander's cocks right now, like, I think the Alaire practitioners are right to not want to be associated with the group that forswore them and used them for experiments.
I mean, yeah.
But pending, I don't know if anybody has a suggestion for a different name we can call them. But anyway, like because
I think
they were
until they become goodies, we should keep calling them what they don't want to be
yeah,
called.
what they deserve. Okay, that's fair. But no, because they were set up early. Like they were one of the first. They were introduced with like Charles's original group of the Angels, the Forsworn, who he was unforswearing. And then they just never really appeared in the context of the Negatiers. And then in 23.z, they showed back up. And now they're constantly getting mentions in this chapter too. And they're doing stuff with glamour. And again, it's just one of those things where I feel like Bobo's put a bunch of puzzle pieces on the board. And I'm just looking at them and I'm like, I don't know how this fits together, but I know you're cooking something. Like, and something that he's been cooking for a while. And I'm going to feel like an idiot when it finally happens. But it's like Charles is about to do something with the Alaire practitioners.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what.
Yeah, he's up to something for sure.
Like they've just come into the story with such force right now. It's probably going to be soon. And yeah, I don't. What could it be? What is glamour? How does glamour help? Glamour's like this puzzle piece. It's just like all slots that don't fit in anywhere. I'm like, I don't know what this means.
Yeah.
There's Pisces
Yeah, I
all
don't
over
know.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, but yeah. So that I can't wait to see the Alaire stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it will be very fun when we see what it is. Yeah, so Teddy does end up calling his parents, but no, there's no comfort to be found there.
I mean, there is. He doesn't take it.
Well, sure, yeah. It's quite depressing, isn't it? Like, he again has the option to take an out. People are desperately trying to give him outs, and he says, no, I don't want an out. I want to be a murderer.
Well, I disagree. He wants the out. He doesn't think he has the out. Like, you know, we've seen what Helen threatens to do to deserters, right? Like,
sure.
Yeah, I feel for him. Like, this just sucks.
Yeah. I did laugh at this line from his dad. He said, we love you, his dad repeated. Whatever's going on, it doesn't matter. Come home. There's a hug waiting for you. We'll take the day off work, whatever you need, but come home. Which I just thought was funny. Like, you've just found out about magic. Like, take a week off, mate. Even without Teddy, like, fuck, take the week off. Learn about magic, dude.
Adults, man.
Crazy.
Yeah. I at this point, because I feel like we stopped caring about Teddy after this when the Ottawa people show up. I want to talk about, like, I thought it was really interesting how this chapter was structured, because like it's only really at the end here of the Teddy chapter that I feel like we really see Teddy as a human. Like it's as he has his panic attack and then fails to get help from every conceivable angle. Whereas, like, for the majority of the chapter, and as we first meet him, it's Teddy is like the drugged up abyssal soldier. And I thought that was really interesting because I definitely found as I was reading the chapter for the first time, it made it hard for me to get a beat on who Teddy was as a person. I feel like all the other Negatier interludes we've had have really introduced them as a human as much as a Charles practitioner right from the get-go. Like Cameron's interlude, Nomi's, Kira Lynn's even. It's like you see the person behind the practitioner as much as, the other way around. Whereas like Teddy is just this soldier and you don't know how much is Teddy and how much is the Abyss for like the first 2/3 of this chapter that we're spending time with him. And I guess I thought that was really interesting because I feel like we've been banging on a lot over the last arc or two about what this war is doing to the Kenneteers and how they're becoming soldiers. And obviously Jasmine is very not chill with that too. Like she's been driving a lot of that conversation in the story. And it's like now we jump over onto the Negatiers side as we're talking about the Kenneteers becoming soldiers and Jasmine putting her foot down. this is what the Negatier version of that looks like, and it's so much worse. Like, for all the shit we want to throw at like Lucy for saying Jasmine's right and that this war is doing terrible things to her, Verona, and Avery, it could be worse.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Could be worse, I guess is a good sentiment.
And like, I do think this whole chapter does a lot to like directly invert 24.1, like the previous chapter. Like in last week's chapter, the Kennetiers opened with, it was like they were walking that path with Avery and everyone was kind of supporting each other. And, you know, there were tensions, but they worked through that and actually had each other's backs. Whereas in this one, we're doing horror transportation, first of all, which is even worse than a path, I'd argue. And also Teddy is just full on alone and he's hostile to all the allies around him. Like, it's just the complete opposite. He's walking an even more horrible path and he doesn't have the allies. And then 24.1 was all about the Kennetiers taking time to mourn their dead. Teddy spends all of 24.8 trying to do the exact fucking opposite. And yeah, like even we haven't talked about it yet, but Teddy has his little abyss coins, and that immediately jumped out to me as like the opposite of Avery's path coins.
Path coins, yeah.
Yeah. And even, you know, we'll get to the ending in a bit, but it's like 24.1 ended on a bit of a downer, which was like, oh, the Charles has his power, we're kind of totally fucked now. Whereas this chapter ends on a bit of a pick me up, and we see that Charles is kind of fucked still for a bit. But yeah, so like, I don't know. I just think it's interesting how much, like, when we read 24.1, it was like, wow, this is a real downer of a chapter, and this sucks. And then 24.8 kind of comes and inverts it, and is like, it could be worse, guys.
Yeah.
Like, as bad as Kenneth is doing last chapter, Charles' side, which is ostensibly winning right now, is somehow even doing worse.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, Charles definitely has the vibe that he thinks he's still winning. But they did suffer. Like, Mercica did just get defeated, right? And I guess Edith died. Or Edith died a long time ago. The girl by candlelight just died. Like, I don't know. They're taking some heavy losses.
The girl by candlelight never fucking mattered. Let's get real about that one.
Sure.
Mercica is a loss, but I do think that's counteracted somewhat by the London
Lord
juice. And I do think, like, there are a couple of comments in this chapter that suggest that Charles has also been emotionally damaged by tonight, and I do think Mercica would be a big part of that, because, like, for all the shit they were to each other and stuff at times, like, she got him out of being forsworn. Everything he has, he does owe to her, and she's been his puppet master for a lot of this. Like, like, I do think emotionally he would be hurting at her loss.
Yeah, good to hear that that he's feeling rough.
Yeah. But I also, like, I only had this sort of about 5 minutes before we started recording, so I might try and do more on it when we're back, I guess. But there's, like, I think talking a lot about how this chapter and last chapter mirror each other, what I'm realizing is we weren't probably more about the Abyss in this chapter than we've known in the whole rest of the story. And it seems to be very directly being set up as like the opposite of the paths, which I think makes sense because the Abyss has kind of always touched on Kennet below, and then the paths are obviously very heavily associated with Kennet found. So I think like we're seeing kind of the Abyss is super duper ultimate Kennet below energy, and then the paths are, you know, ultimate Kennet found energy, and we're seeing Kennet really lean into its foundness as well as its diversity, whereas we're seeing Charles's side lean very much into the Abyss stuff. And I think I guess maybe this is why the Abyss started getting introduced to this story around Arc 14, was when it really came to the fore. It's like, I kind of see it's being set up as the opposite of the paths, and that's a really interesting thread to try and follow into the finale, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, I want to start viewing the Abyss as the opposite of the paths, I guess, and relate that to Kennet below and Kennet found.
Yeah. And Kennet just stuck in the middle, I guess.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the interesting is there a third part to that triangle as well? Like, if we've got the Abyss and the paths, I don't think the ruins is particularly Kennet above.
But I think it's explicitly a non-magical. I think explicitly the non-magical world is that third part, right?
Yeah, it just continues to be the benign, innocent world.
Yeah.
Like the ordinary family version of things. I mean, like, something that came up in my live read is actually, like, you know, Kennet found and Miss, and even the Blue Heron were very blue coded. Like, blue has a very strong association in this story, and similarly, red is obviously very Carmine, Undercity, not abyssal, I guess, but like it's been very red for below and carmine, and blue for miss
Mm,
and found. There's not
mm,
really a color for Kennet above. Like we're trying to brainstorm some in my library, but I guess
mm.
maybe white or gray or something. But
Yeah.
yeah, like like this is
Beige.
just interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fair. Boring, but like this is the weird thing about this triangle of Kennet below, Kennet found, and Kennet above is that Kennet above's kind of defining feature is just not having any and being the norm. Like, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it is good. Um yeah. But yeah, so I mean, things go from bad to worse for the Carmine crew, especially Teddy, because he's meeting with the Carmine and the Ottawa representatives, and things seem to be going well until they introduce their newest diplomat.
huzzah!
Oh,
This
it's
is so.
so good. Long live the king, huh? What a moment. It's actually such a fun, triumphant return.
I thought like it was great too because for those who don't know, on our Discord, we just got the emote of this guy on our Discord like a week ago, and it was like, wow, this is like 6 months late. Turns out it was just in time.
Yeah. Or
Like,
maybe
yeah,
Wabo saw the emote come in and was like, oh, maybe I'll bring him back.
yeah. That's how he makes big decisions in the story
Based
like
on the
this.
emotes in our server, yeah. No, yeah,
But
it's
yeah,
very
I was
fun.
worried I was worried our emote had been so. And it's just so good. Like the way it's unveiled, I love. Like as it's happening, it's like they reveal their newest member, and it's like the Carmine put his elbow on the table, hand over mouth. It's like the shock and just insult that Charles is giving off, and that is so good.
Yeah, and it's so fun. I mean, like, obviously, the whole chapter has been such a downer, but this ending is like such a lift. It's delightful, especially
Oh yeah,
because rereading it, you get all this stuff where they're like, yes, and you, of course, have to agree to listen to all of
yeah.
our things. And it's like, it's so perfectly set up without us or Charles realizing. It's wonderful.
Oh yeah, fucking Charles is just like, classic Ottawa, bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and like, somebody pointed this out. I think in my live read, I can't remember who. I'm sorry, I'm not giving you credit, but like, it's also great because it's like the thing they've set up is Charles now cannot break the rules of hospitality, which is
Mm-hmm.
exactly how Alexander got him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's just that's a extra fun little needle to poke him with. Is this is a little reminiscent of exactly how Alexander shit stirred him when he got forsworn.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, Alabaster Assembly on high alert right now, watching their back.
I mean, yeah. So
You
this is
never know. The Kennedys might be coming back for round two.
yeah. I mean, or yeah, fucking have a crack at the Aurum. I reckon. I don't know.
Yeah.
This is the thing. I don't really know. Like, I guess Kenneth can just now spend some time really locking in their whole
Their one last fight.
yeah, their awareness plan.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, because this is the point where it was like, okay, thank God, Kenneth actually has a window of opportunity. Like,
Yes.
now that Charles is out, it was like, because
Yeah.
24.1, I was sitting there and I was like, how do you beat this guy?
Yeah.
And it turns out the answer is a filibuster loophole that, like, it's shocking that this
That
still
he's
works in
already
2021.
fallen for.
They
That's the
got him
best part,
again.
that he fell for it twice. Ah.
That's so good.
It's
Um,
a great note to end this chapter on, isn't it?
yeah. Although, sorry, again, like, just in my, desperate for Charles to keep that one good thingism,
Mm-hmm.
he does say, things in my jurisdiction will be different. There will be rolling effects. London knows and accepts this. So,
Mm.
at the very least, Charles is holding on to something.
He's got some plan, yeah, that's
Yeah.
going to change things.
And, like, this will be the thing, right? It's like, okay, what are these effects? Like, that will change how much I'm like, oh, Charles has completely sold out and become everything he was trying to stop. Or he's done horrible things and achieved a somewhat decent result. I just don't see the latter happening, even though I want it to. But, like, at least Charles isn't letting me fully give up on. He's doing something still.
Yeah, he's
Also,
definitely up
sorry,
to something.
Percival has 100 titles now, not 99. Do you think his 100th title is the first Percival, like successor to the first Percival's title in full?
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I like that.
Like, that's what I'd do if I were Ottawa. Fuck, I love Ottawa's energy when they come in here and it's like, I'm a chronomancer. and she enjoys suffering, so we're here for the long haul.
That was very funny. Yeah, I get power from suffering, so I'm here. Anyway,
So I'm curious to see who wasn't in this meeting though. Like because everyone in
Who
this
is
meeting
still
can't
active.
leave. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I mean,
Charles
but,
is out.
Teddy was here, so like, why the fuck was Teddy here? Like, if Teddy was here, surely a lot of key players were here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe Teddy drew the short straw or something. I don't know. I want Helen to still be active. Like, it seems a bit easy for Kenneth if or most of Charles's contingent is in this meeting. There's going to have to be some people out and about. They've just lost their workhorse.
Yeah. But that's the end of the chapter for today, which means it's also the end of our episode. Ain't that right, Elliot?
Not quite.
No. You thought the episode was coming to an end, but actually, this is just the end of the first third.
Yeah, we paled you. Get paled. Yeah, we're not going to do Pale Predictor stuff this week just because this episode's going to be so fucking long, but do keep submitting Pale predictions, please.
Yeah, so you can find the link to do that in our show notes down below in the episode description stuff.
But yeah, it's the 3-year anniversary of Pale, and we're about to go on a hiatus, so we thought we'd do a fun little recap.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, Magic. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday, Magic.
Yeah, that's probably long enough. There's like another 2 minutes of that.
Yeah. I'll put the full version in the episode.
Don't do that. Just after we made fun of Charles falling for Percival, we can't do that to everyone.
Anyway, happy birthday, Magic. We're here to talk about Pale. 3-year anniversary. Wow.
Yeah, so we've asked a bunch of people to name their favorite parts, but we're going to go through the whole story and call those out as we get to them, I guess.
Yeah, now we've got 17 pages of notes to go through.
Strap in, everyone. It turns out even a summary of Pale is quite fucking long. This took a lot more time than I expected to put together. I'm going to be honest.
Who would have thought?
Not me, apparently.
Yeah.
Let's start with Arc 0, the obvious place to start. Blood Run Cold. We got a little prologue chapter. Louise followed an injured dog. She kissed a cute boy who later she would, kiss a bunch more, apparently. And yeah, just generally sets up a mystery.
Yeah. What a great start to the story it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So good.
It was fun. Like putting these notes together, I went through all of our like reflecting episode notes to, get chapter summaries and stuff. And I'd totally forgotten we had my sisters on to talk about this episode, this chapter.
Wait, so we did a reflecting episode just for the first chapter?
No, we just had people on for the first episode and lucked out that kind of worked out as a reflecting episode.
Oh, that's fun. Oh, yeah, cool.
But yeah, and technically I think Art Zero also includes the first extra material, like the Kennett brochure.
Yes, and that was also great. Finding out that there were going to be extra materials. Oh, what a treat.
I think we're going to be talking about extra materials a lot in this recap because they're so fun. But yeah, and I think, was this the first time Wildbow's done a prologue? I don't count Glowworm before anybody writes that down because that was
half an interlog.
Yeah. But because I just remember, I think it was around this time, Scott Daly was obviously coming down real harsh on the concept of prologues. And I thought it was great that Wildbow then did one, and it really acted as a great intro to a mystery.
Yeah. Anyway, that's Arc 0. Great arc.
Yeah.
Arc 1, Lost for Words. We meet our trio of heroes. Verona, who always cleans her house, mows her lawn, hates her dad, and ditches humanity. Lucy, who is all about justice and injustice. And is traumatized by the mean dog that points a gun at her head, and Avery, a lonely girl with a love of travel, walking on beaches and singing shows. We also meet Gabe, the fourth Kennetier, but I don't really remember much about him.
No, I don't think he stuck around. But yeah, it was really funny reading our notes on Arc 1 and just like putting myself in the mindset of what it was such a different world back then, both in our world and in Kennett. This was one of the most fun ones. a lot of work, like the summary for this arc is quite short because so much of this arc was really just establishing the world and the characters, which we don't need to recap so much because everyone's really fucking
Everyone already
familiar
knows
with them.
now, yeah.
But it was really fun, sort of revisiting what the mentality was like, and like how fresh everything still was back then. These were three girls who seemed really out of their depth and weren't trustworthy yet. Like Verona, like John points a gun at them and they freak out, and it's like now Lucy's headshotting family men. Like just it's almost an entirely different story. It was great.
Yeah.
Also, one of the notes I wanted to make here, I can't believe we still call them the Kenneteers. I really thought that was going to be a stand-in name for like 2 weeks before they took an official team name in the story.
Is that right? I guess it just is a good name. It's stuck around because it's good.
Yeah, I guess I'm just surprised they've never gotten a team name beyond Kennet Practitioners. Maybe it's because I was coming from the superhero web serials or something, but I really expected them to get an official one.
Should we christen them with a new team name now?
Oh, no, I'm too deep in on Kenneteers.
Yeah, I like Kenneteers. It's nice. So in Arc 2, Stolen Away.
Oh, sorry. Before we, I just wanted to call out. So the Arc 1 had a lot more extra materials, which I just wanted to call out because this is where we really got a taste for how much variety there would be in them. Like, we had the interview notes, which I thought were a great way to like keep up with all the characters and stuff. That those were a great resource when we were recording early episodes.
Those were good. Yeah.
What do we know about Alpi? I wish we had one for the Negateers. I'm gonna be honest, like I had to go use Snowdrop's Tiny Fans doc for this one. It was for this last chapter to remind myself what we knew about Teddy and Joseph. It's just like those was such a great resource as people following the story, and especially if you're not following it as closely as we are, I imagine.
For sure,
like, such a great idea.
Yeah. Just the kind of, I mean, I guess it's like it's similar to what fantasy authors will do with their kind of codexes and shit, like your Silmarillions and stuff. So it's not like it's that unique, but I guess in this format, it just is very, I don't know. I haven't really seen it that much. It's great.
Yeah, but and the other one we got in Arc 1 was the notes on practices, which is our first one, and it kind of talked about basic like circle drawing and rune stuff. And I just really like that was that sort of thing that I think only could exist in extra materials. Like nobody wants to get that deeper lore dive in written texts and stuff, right? Like it was just a really cool new thing that this story could do that say Pact couldn't. As you said, it's the sort of thing where like some fantasy books might start to include diagrams.
Well, I guess I'm thinking of maps and stuff. Yeah.
And, that brochure in Arc 0 included a map. Like, just I don't know. They added so much to the story. Like, the extra materials are such a special part of this point in the story, and that really stood out to me rereading our notes from these arcs.
Yeah. Arc 2, Stolen Away. The Kenneteers recover from the trauma of what they saw in the Hungry Quiet ritual and then decide the next best thing to do is meet the local fae. Verona gets minked. Avery also gets minked, but that's slang for something else, which is kissing a girl. And Lucy gets enraged by being the only adult in the group until she runs into Paul and curses him in a tantrum. They have a field trip with Alpi. They head to the ruins, the spirit world, and they, brackets Melissa, deal with Nicolette coming in. Avery goes to the Forest Ribbon Trail and fucks it up because she's shit. But then we find out actually Nicolette is the one whose life is shit, and we should feel more sorry for her than we do.
Like again, what a crazy different time to like, it's so funny revisiting, like thinking about the time the Kenneteers first went and met Marissa and Guillemette, and just like knowing where things go. It's just like it's just such a funny interaction.
I love to think about the vibe of when Nicolette was kind of coming into Kennet, and the vibe was like, okay,
she was the big bad.
Yeah, she was like Alexander's lieutenant or whatever, and you were like, oh shit, like if Alexander's gets on the wrong page about Kennet, like things gonna go so shit. And it's like, well, that kind of almost happened, but then things got so much worse. It's like quaint to think about.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's the big vibe I got rereading our notes on like arcs 1, 2, and 3. I was just like, it just feels like a different story with the way it's just like this, like
Yeah.
cheery little, like, you know, 3 girls learning about magic from their local monsters, and it was all contained to the town, like, and just one version of that town because why would you have 3? Like,
Yeah.
it's such a
But
fun, like, I don't know,
yeah.
yeah,
But
like
having said that, like some of the scenes from these first few arcs stand out so clearly in my mind. Like, do you
oh
remember
yeah,
when they're on the back of the truck and Verona boomerangs her hat? Like, that is an
yes,
iconic scene to me. And that was like years ago now.
yeah.
It's crazy.
Absolutely. Like, you know, we got people submitting stuff for this arc, which was like, you know, the Forest Ribbon Trail comic that we got that kind of really nailed in how fucked Avery was on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like moments like that, I
God, the
could still
Forest Ribbon
picture the
Trail,
ribbons.
so good. The twist of what Snowdrop's gimmick was,
Yeah.
like all that stuff. Oh my God, it's like peak. It's peak
Yeah.
stuff.
I guess it's just interesting how much, yeah, like the story has grown, which like makes sense. Like it's such a nothing insight. But you really you feel it rethinking about what the vibe of arcs 1, 2, and 3 was. And it's just like, oh, this was just a cheery little happy-go-lucky story. And you know, now we're talking about 24.1 and
Yeah.
24.8, which is like the aftermath of a war.
What's interesting to me though, I guess, is like the small moments are still they hit so hard then and they hit so hard now, you know, like
Yeah.
thinking about like Verona boomeranging her hat to like the return of Sir Percy. And it's like these are just so, like it's just such good feelings the whole way through the story. I love it.
Yeah. But then on the other hand, you get stuff like, it's like, yeah, Verona got turned into a mink. Remember that was a big fucking deal? Whereas
Yeah.
like now, who cares? Like,
Yeah.
and similar, you get stuff like when Avery turned herself into a boy and kissed Pam, and it was a bit like,
I-
oh, I forgot these kids used to be kind of fucking idiots. Like, whereas now
Yeah.
Avery's like more emotionally mature than I am by a
Yeah,
fucking
she would
mile.
never do
like,
that now.
yeah, like it's interesting to see I guess the character growth alongside the story growth, which again, we all knew it was happening. It's just you really see it when you look at the start of the story again.
Mm.
I also remember Arc 2 was really fun because there was a bit of a thing back here where I think Arc 1 really introduced us to the Kenneteers as individuals. And then Arc 2 had this fun thing where it kept pairing Kenneteers up. So we get like Lucy and Verona hanging out, Avery and Lucy with Paul. You know, like it sort of tested all the combinations, and we got stuff like Avery seeing Verona's house. And it's that sort of thing where I'd love to revisit all those interactions in more detail with our knowledge of like, you know, the current model of Kennet found, Kennet below, and Kennet above, and how each Kennetier ranks all 3 differently. There's probably like fun stuff there, which I don't think Walbo was planning that all the way back here, but there'd be like great through lines just because he's consistent like that.
Yeah.
This is also where we got our first thing from the community. Somebody called out a moment from this arc, which is just the bit where Snowdrop burns down the blue heron. And they specifically called out the bit where Nicolette pulls Snowdrop out of the Forest Ribbon Trail, puts her in a thing, and then says, "So you're going to stay here if I leave you for a minute?" Snowdrop says, "Yes." "You won't touch anything?" "I won't." "And you'll be good?" "Absolutely." Like, that absolutely
Yes,
is
what
a quote
yeah.
I remember 3 years later. Yeah.
So good. So good. Oh my God.
Like the execution, like we spend all of 2.9, I think it is, learning about Snowdrop's thing, and then
Yes.
just to use it so quickly in 2.x is great.
And so perfectly. It's actually so perfect. But yeah, so arc 3, out on a limb. The 2 remaining Kenneteers rush to save Avery and eventually miss
Which, sorry, I'm just gonna interrupt. They'll be doing that again in like 20 arcs. Like, Avery, get your shit together.
Always saving Avery from dying on a path. Huh? But yeah, so they eventually convince Mist to help and switch places, as well as putting on their little kid hats to negotiate with Alexander. Avery comes back, bit traumatized, whatever. They do some more interviews, including interviewing Louise. They find and capture Bree, who's hanging around. Then they free Bree, who teams up with Zed to capture the Hungry Choir with their Blue Heron BFFs. Gosh, it so much fits into these arcs, even all the way back then.
Believe me, summarizing them was so fucking hard. Do you remember when Bree ate a chunk of, I want to say, Gashwad? when they were escaping in this.
Oh,
I don't know why,
yeah.
but that scene lives rent free in my head.
Yeah, the Bree tied up in the goblin cabin is
Yeah.
definitely one that's stuck in my head.
And like
What a great one.
Lucy and Verona acting like Brett and being stubborn children to cancel Alexander on Maricica's orders. Great scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like again just this is the sort of thing where it's like I'd love somebody who's taking like a bigger picture look at this story. The way you can sort of compare Avery disappearing on the path for a couple of chapters to Arc 22, there's probably some really interesting stuff to mine there with how the Kenneteers cope with it as a trio.
Mm.
Like we talked, like Avery came back and she's still kind of dealing with her trauma from the wolf and the ageism that's come with it for her as a part of it. Whereas like I don't know that she's really had time to process the same thing from Arc 22. Yeah, Arc 23 was kind of wild. But I'm still expecting her to not quite be out of the woods from her most recent excursion, I guess. I'm interested to see if that catches up with her.
Yeah. I don't know.
So Arc 4, Leaving a Mark, opens with Avery visiting the Alabaster Doe's cult, and then she meets good boy Jude Garrick.
Jude.
We also meet Sylvia at the start of this arc, and we learn that she kind of sucks, but don't worry, I'm sure she'll get better later. The Kenneteers all go to the end of year party at some cabins where Verona loses her bag because Melissa steals it. And they team up with Jeremy to go get it, and there's a song other from Zed that gets released. Then they go to the Blue Heron in Arc 4, and Alexander gives a really big speech about how great he is. Lucy gets kicked out of Ray's class for being disruptive. And then we learn that there's some trouble heading Kennett's way in the form of Bristow. Alexander is nice enough to give them notes on Bristow and who he's probably sending to Kennett. And then Avery's new friend Jessica helps them use the ruins to get back to Kennett in time. There's also this is the one with the Snowdrop interlude where she has like the fucking animal sidekick adventure with the brownies while the girls are at class, just like fucking the Upper and Momo episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's great.
Yeah, true. Yeah. I mean, gosh. And then we got to the BHI. We got some BHI bits, and it was just so radical, huh?
And just like the whole, like, it's a magic school, and, obviously it's a bit of a staple for the genre to have the magic school. This was like such a fun version of it. I loved the brownies as dangerous magical servants.
The brownies is just an immediate way to say, hey, this place is magical, but also if you fuck up, you're so fucked. Yeah.
And just like all that stuff with the party, like that's classic early Pale. Like, and I guess as I feel like, we are talking a lot about what this war has done to our trio of Kenneteers and how they're not the same kids anymore, for better or for worse. You really feel that talking about, remember, the big drama in their lives for half an arc was Verona lost her bag because Melissa stole it and we have to find her. Like, that's just so not what would happen in Arc 24, Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, they were kids. I mean, it's stupid to say, but all these arcs ago, they were just little kids.
Yeah. It's just great. It's great stuff. So yeah, in Arc 5, Back Away, Kennett is being invaded, so the Kenneteers back away from the Blue Heron Institute to get back from being away. I remember we made some jokes about that back in the arc, but it's still funny to me. So yeah, Clem's there teaming up with the BFFs Daniel and Sharon. And we haven't seen Sharon since, and that's so sad, right?
It kind of is. I love to hate her, you know what I mean?
Know. She was so fun. But yeah, so it's Clem, Daniel, and Sharon, and they all just start messing with shit in their own special ways. Sharon knocks out the perimeter and then gets knocked out by John and Verona. Verona and Bristow make a bet about who's going to regret this more. Spoiler alert, Bristow ends up regretting it more. Avery fights the pig dog man, and the gang stops Daniel from making a magic Fey tower. They make peace, and then we get some details from Clem about the Carmine Furs, and there's new Kennett others in town.
Yeah, and
Miss is on the paths. Yeah. Miss is coming back. God, I forgot that Miss was gone for a while.
Yeah. She's been gone since Arc 3. She's come back to like Arc 10. It's crazy how long she's gone. I do like Arc 5, and I don't know for what reason. It's one of the arcs I remember the most vividly. Like everything you've just described was one of those things where I didn't have a single moment where I was like, oh yeah, that was Arc. I probably could have written this one from memory. I don't know why, but Arc 5 was like all the interludes from like Clem and Daniel's perspectives were so vivid. Daniel making that tower, and everyone having to climb it to beat him. He fucked Marisica right up. Like he almost, if he'd been a little more vicious to Marisica, he could have solved the whole fucking story. Apparently, yeah, crazy arc. I loved it.
Yeah, yeah, great stuff. God, the Fey Tower. That's a peak
Yeah.
moment.
It must be
them kind of
fan
falling
art
off
of it.
and catching each other and all that stuff. Like crazy stuff.
Oh, and this was the first like big interlude arc. Like they started to become a regular thing before. I feel like recently they're just becoming almost the standard. But like this was the first arc that didn't sort of follow that format of just having like one interlude near the end. It was very interlude heavy.
Yeah.
And that was really fun and sort of set a tone for how those would work. Like Arc 10 followed it as the next one. And it was a really like sort of special event when it happened in these sorts of arcs when you'd see a dot A and you'd be like, oh, we're in for some shit.
Yeah.
Also, shout out to the extra material of Sharon's phone so that we didn't have to have a whole interlude in her head. Perhaps one of the strongest uses of extra materials is to get around giving us a Sharon interlude.
Yeah.
This was also the arc with the. So this was also the arc with the interlude where we learned about all of the fairy courts.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And I'm still
don't
salty
need to learn about
that.
them. Yeah, don't need to learn about them anymore.
I'm salty. It was like 3 weeks ago. I finally put together what I thought was a cohesive theory on why they were the way they were and how each one maps very specifically to a Kenneteer. It was like, oh, Walbo chose the 3 courts because Spring is Verona and blah blah blah. That was just complete waste of time.
Yeah.
So far, I felt Avery's pain at that EM ends with Avery being like, I've wasted all this time for nothing, and I really felt that when 23.Z dropped.
Yeah.
Oh, we got a discussion question answer for this arc as well from Propaganda Pagoda.
Yeah.
This is where Matthew and Verona have a really good moment where basically Matthew is like, wow, you guys are really good.
Yeah. I think the reason Propaganda Pagoda called it out as loving it so much was because it was kind of, I mean, Verona has always been the least openly affectionate Kenneteer, I guess, or like openly like friendly.
Kind and caring.
Yeah, but this is one right before Verona meets Tashley for the first time, and 2, Verona is like, this is a great example of Verona being like, Matthew says, thank you for helping tonight. Verona says, glad to. And then she kind of reflects on it and thinks, no, yeah, I'm like here to help, She's like, she's not just here incidentally. She's here. She was actually picked for a reason.
Yeah. There was a great moment actually reading through our Arc 2 notes where one of us had written, and I can't remember who wrote it, but one of us had written, meeting, seeing Brett and Verona here together in this arc, like Arc 2, really makes you realize that there is a kind, caring girl just buried deep beneath the trauma her father has instilled on her. And it was like, it only took her 11 more arcs to figure that out, but she got there.
Yeah. Yeah, good stuff. Next up is Arc 6, Cutting Class. The Kenneteers go back to school so they can learn about cutting, knives, scissors, all that stuff. They do research on the locals in the library. They fail to make friends with any of the other folks at the Blue Heron Institute, Yadira, Raquel, Cassidy.
Sorry, I just want to focus in on that trio because I remember when they got introduced and I was like, oh, is this a rival trio? Are they going to be around a lot? And it's like,
well, I guess Raquel
and
Cassidy's
dad's popped up, but Yadira, what are you up to? Like,
who knows? And who cares? Got other stuff to worry about. But of course, the Kenneteers are having fun, picking on each other and playing pranks and doing all those classic tomfoolery.
Verona's eating actual food.
Yep. Bristow teaches us about knotted spaces and undercities, and then Shelley sabotages the Jessica Kasabian's ritual. So, whoops, Bristow, fucking hate you. Lucy does her implement ritual, which has a bunch of great visions, and we also kind of cut between this and some tournament stuff, like it's a early Naruto chapter, which is great. And then we round out the arc by seeing the fall of Alexander's circle from Fernanda's head, and Seth is forsworn, and I'm sure that won't have any ramifications.
Yeah. I reckon he deserved it. There's a lot to talk about with this arc, which I feel like is probably the first. This is the first arc where I was like, oh, this is where we got to the growing up part, like the grown up part of the story. Like, it wasn't just the simple, just the mystery and can it. I was like, oh, we're in this for the long haul. Which at the time I thought meant like 10 arcs. Obviously, not quite how long a haul we were in for, but this was the arc that had the 3 textbook extra materials. Like, while we're talking about extra materials a bunch, God, that was cool. Like, getting to read chunks of Implement, Famulus, and Domain. So good.
Yeah, that was good. And then, of course, Lucy's implement ritual. I mean,
yes.
God, what a moment.
And this is Megafire's answer to the discussion question. Yeah. Which because I was like, somebody will call that out. We don't need to write notes on it because this would be in my top 3 parts of the story easily. But yeah, Megafire's written. Lucy's implement ritual is my go-to. From the decision to get one, her conversation with Ray about it, Verona and Avery's efforts to make her implement for her, the Alcazar dive into Avery's picture, then the ritual itself. It's gold from start to finish, and it remains, to date, my favorite sequence in Pale.
I mean, it is a great time.
Top tier.
Yeah.
Also, this was like the arc where the Kenneteers really started to lean into actually being willing to bind the Kennet others, which jumped out to me, like skimming our notes. Or it was like, this is like where the Kenneteers started to actually be practitioners, I guess.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to think about.
That was a big concern, was around binding.
Yeah.
And I mean, but on the other hand, if they had bound Marcy, none of this shit would have happened.
I mean, they try that. Like, this is the thing, is I think it's like Arc 11, and we'll reach that soon, but, Arc 11 talks a lot about, like, and actually, so it's Arc 15 as well, where Lucy really struggles with her role as a practitioner, kind of mapping to, like, being a policeman, for obvious reasons. And Arc 6 just jumped out to me in retrospect as the one where it was like, this was the one where the Kenneteers really started considering we might have to actually do this. Like, we might need to, bind people. And that was kind of crazy at the time.
Yeah.
We also got a discussion question answer for this arc-ish from I'm Easily Impressed, who called out that moment where Yadira, Raquel, and Cassidy were talking to the Kenneteers, and Snowdrop claims that she is the sponsor of the Kenneteers when those 3 are pressing to find out how the Kenneteers have all this power. And then I'm Easily Impressed also obviously just highlights the the Thunder Bay Council intro. Like, just this whole vibe of like Snowdrop having those moments where she just says something completely outrageous to people who don't know her shtick.
Yeah.
And I'm Easily Impressed also just wanted to call out the community vibe, like the Reddit. Then apparently the Doof Discord, like, just for this was apparently the first Wildbow story they've followed live, and they've just really enjoyed being a part of the community.
Yeah, I think I following Ward live, kind of, but not really as invested in the community, I guess, obviously, as when now we're doing a show for Pale. It is a very different vibe. It's nice. It's a good community.
Yeah. I wish, in the context of running this show, I wish I was better at being deeper in the community. I feel like I very much sit outside of it for the most part, which is annoying. But, like, I agree. I think, like, Ward, I kind of dropped in and out of talking to people, and I like something about the Pale community has just felt more fun and positive. I've really enjoyed following this story with everyone.
Yeah. So Arc 7, Gone Ahead, the arc in which Ahead is gone.
Which, just to jump ahead, that was Beleg Tal's answer to the discussion question.
It's such a funny one.
But yeah, Wildbow confirming on Reddit that was like an intentional pun. Like, great.
Good stuff. So we finally learn about Oni. What are they all about? The conflict.
I mean, I'm still kind of asking. The more we learn about Rook, the more I am kind of like, what is the deal with Oni? We still don't
know. The conflict at the BHI ramps up. The Kenneteers call in some support, including John, Alpi, and some Gobbos. Bristow has plans for the region, but it requires him in charge, so I don't know. Ray teaches a lesson on objectifying others. Shelley impersonates Durashay and attacks the Kenneteers. Operation Brownie is initiated but backfired, and the war kicks off. There's a bunch of fighting in the forest. Lila dies. Verona gets another chance thanks to Avery and the power of friendship and succeeds. And Bristow is carried away to be eaten by brownies and turned into fucking bonky donks. I don't know, whatever. And then also
I don't think
Alexander
he's sorry.
gets shot.
I think Bristow is too healthy to be in a bonky donk. Like, he has too much nutritional value.
Sure. But yeah, there was also a Kevin Noon interlude in there, and Ulysses, he's around.
Yeah, well, I just because I wrote that bit about the Kevin Noon interlude, and I was like, I didn't really focus on that because like Kevin sucks, but I was like, Ulysses was in that interlude and he was cool.
Yeah, he's a cool dude.
But yeah, I could get one of those arcs where I was like, this felt huge at the time. Like Layla dying was a big fucking deal. This like what we thought was an all-out war at the Blue Heron Institute, but by Arc 23 standards was actually quite calm. Yeah, just again like a crazy arc to look back on and think how big it was at the time. This is the first arc that I think had Musser in it. He was one of Bristow's helpers.
Yeah. Wow. What a guy.
Yeah.
Can't believe it. And then it's crazy to think to kind of look back and see, oh, he was that character who I kind of dismissed and then became very, very important.
Yeah, it happens a lot in this story, doesn't it? We also the extra material for this arc that we really have to call out was, can we talk about the girls?
Oh yeah,
which for me, not so much in its role as an extra material because it was really just a micro chapter. Huge, important, establishing thing for the story. I think, like, obviously, I think the awareness and all the stuff going on right now, particularly in the story with like revealing magic, has been a big part of this story. And I think a lot of that, can we talk about the girls? I think is an easy thing to point out and be like, this is when Pale started taking it really seriously.
Yeah. Yeah,
like,
right.
it really established the parents as characters, which has been pretty crucial to how well the awareness have worked in Pale.
Yeah, you're right. It's really where the parents where we started to see, hey, the parents are going to become more and more a part of this story, and I think that's such a cool contrast to magic children stories in general.
Yeah, like I would call this, even though it's an extra material, I'd call it one of the most important chapters in Pale, I think. Can we talk about the girls?
Yeah. Not in the least, because it was when the other parents decided that Brett wasn't worth the trouble.
Yeah, pretty much. It was also, like, we touched on the Alexander interlude, but this is where we really met like the original Blue Heron squad. Like, we saw Charles when he was hanging out with them. Like, we met Louisa Crow, never to be seen again because she's too lucky to be a part of this story. Like, just fun. The ramifications of that original Blue Heron thing have been huge in this story, and it was just, I guess, fun to see the original squad in this chapter all those years ago.
Yeah.
Arc 8, vanishing points, not horizon points, Teddy. So yeah, the Blue Heron Institute is without any principles. Spell that as you may. So Durashay does a cool recovery class with Meta Phaos, which talk about a memorable 1-bit character. The Kenneteers make peace with Shelley. Verona vomits out her emotions. Avery goes to the ruins with Jess and almost falls prey to yearning, which at the time I thought was going to come back at some point, at least more directly. And then we meet Mum of the Year, Mrs. Ferguson. What a character. Unfortunately...
so good.
Yeah.
She's so good. And every time we get to see her, she continues to be exceptional.
The bit in Arc 21, before we Kipos' live read, and she just reached that, and Mrs. Ferguson and Sol's dynamic was so aggressive in that. So she's pushing him and he was snarking back. So good. I love them both. Yes. Anyway, unfortunately, the class with Mrs. Ferguson is interrupted because everyone's figured out Alexander is dead. Verona is worried about how she can dodge the questions on it before just imitating Marissa and Edith to get out of it, which is a clue, like a correlation she does not think on enough. But anyway, the Kenneteers are kicked out of school anyway because Ray realizes they were getting it for free. And so for their last day, they go on a trip to the fairy markets, and then they go back to Kennet. There's also in the middle of this arc, there was the Liberty interlude with the
Oh
goblin
yeah,
transformations,
yeah.
and then the arc sort of
And then the
culminated
fight with America, yeah.
yep, and the Feymorans exactly. And then interspersed throughout this arc were the emails teaching us about the new citizens of Kennet who we would meet in person in Arc 9, but who were established in Arc 8, which I thought was a cool way to use extra materials. Again, like I love the variety in the ways Walbo used extra materials.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, totally. Some great extra materials. I think all the ones teaching us about all the new Kennet others was great stuff. Like really
Yeah.
useful, but also like great teasers for some of the interactions that we were going to have. So much fun.
Yeah. Oh, and like just a clever use of the format because this is when it was like you'd get 2 chapters a week and the extra material kind of in the middle of them, and it was like if you're just kind of binging it, I can kind of see how jumping into these emails from Matt, and it was like 2 groups, in a different week, it would kind of be flow breaking. Like it would be really hard to do this in a traditional novel, like include these emails like this. But as extra materials, they were great because it's like it's established that kind of is outside the flow, but not really. Like it's a cool way to seed stuff that I don't think you could do in another format as easily. Like they don't fit into episodes of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So yeah, Arc 9, Shaking Hands. The Kenneteers are back in Kennet and kind of struggling to reintegrate. We met our new best friend Liz, who's going to be great, offers some good advice, and I'm sure is going to be very friendly. The Kenneteers struggle to bond with pretty much everyone else. Avery tries to reach out to Melissa, but can't do it, so just trashes her stuff instead. We learn about the Bathos and a gang of doppelgangers, including Reggie, who becomes Hollow Yen and a pretty all-round cool guy. Lucy takes a stand about how she interrogates the prison in Matt's basement. Verona has a big fight with her dad and finds the Carmine furs, and while she secures them, Lucy, Avery, and Melissa save Reggie from the Bathos. We round out the arc with a Tash interlude, including a dream chat with Monty.
Like this, this is the first arc that was a lot bigger than the others. I remember Pale had very consistent arc lengths until Arc 9, which just was like twice as long, and has since been well and truly shattered in length by others. But yeah, like remember the Bathos and like how scary that was. Good times.
I think remembering the moment where they find the furs at the cabin,
Yes.
and then I either at the very end of this arc or at the very start of next arc, find out, oh, okay, Edith is one of the conspirators. And that was just such a big twist to me. Like I remember Matthew and Edith being like the chill parents of these 3 Kenneteers, basically, right? And then finding this out, and the moments where we didn't know, oh my god, is Matthew in on this too? Like,
yeah.
And I think we kind of would just assume that he is, right? Because of how close they were.
We'd been given clues about Edith's guilt through things like the coins and stuff in Arc 3, but I kind of never wanted to believe it because you're right, she was the mum, and the way they were coded made you think that Matthew was manipulating her.
Yeah, God.
And like, so just, the sort of reveals, like the more we learned about Edith, the more it was like, it seems obvious now, but at the time it was really hard to make yourself believe that she could be one of the lead conspirators. And that bit where Verona has the fight with her dad and finds the furs was Snowdrop's Tiny Fan's answer to the discussion question. Like 9.9, they say, is still the Pale chapter that hits the hardest. Even after all this time in the story, I think the fight between Verona and her dad is one of the most emotionally intense moments in the entire story. There's such a beautiful culmination of every moment between them up until that confrontation, and then it leads to the furs, which is like... But that's not the part you remember. Like STF was like, it's crazy that Pale is the story that makes me care more about the fight with her dad than finding the furs. She also talked about like what it did to the Pale Discord, which was apparently going a mile a minute for days after that chapter came out.
Aired, yeah.
Which I don't go into that server very much because there's too many people and it scares me. But like I've noticed the Pale channel in there is on like permanent slow mode now, and I feel like it was chapters like this that probably did that. And then STF also wanted to call out Megafy's essay on the fight between Verona and Brett in 9.9, and
Yes.
Megafire's
yes.
essays are a big, like, I wanted to focus on things that happened in the community as we went through this, and like Megafire's essays are a big standout for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, Arc 10, one after another. Arc 9 was a little bit upsetting. I'd rather think about a wedding. Good reference, Elliot.
I'm so glad you got that.
Of course I did. Arc 10 kicks off with the promenade familiar ritual, and then the gang try running the path. John fights his big bad wolf. Oh god, that interlude was so good. God, so good. And then we had, was this Sig's interlude as well here? That can't be right.
Yeah.
Wow.
The very next chapter goes 10.A John, then 10.B Sig.
Wow, what a great 1-2 punch of chapters. Excellent. So yeah, we then have our voyeur Sig, who checks in on Melissa. Fun bit where you think it's going to be a Melissa interlude, but nope, it's just Sig who gets her busted for smoking. But then he spots a witch hunter. Chloe and Nibble barely escape. Alpi tries to invade his dreams, and we learn his hilarious backstory and perpetual love of milk. For the 100th chapter, we get a Toady interlude. We learn about him. He offers Snowdrop a job, and we learn about his 8th Court plans. Marcy kills Raph. We learn that Guillermo was the one who hired him. Can we talk about that for a second? God, these fucking Fae. 5D chess with time travel, huh?
But like, again, this was the Guillermo who wasn't good at it anymore. Like, so just kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it was sort of hilariously tragic watching Guillermo try to scheme his way through this story and not be good at it because he was falling to winter and not realizing how it was harming him. And then he got his comeuppance in Arc 23 when he finally accepted who he was now and trounced Marcy.
Good on him. But yeah, Verona returns with Miss. Also, Rook's definitely good now and on our side. The arc wraps up with a Girl by Candlelight origin story interlude, and we learn that she's been the villain all along.
Before we get further into discussing this arc, I feel like I should play the audio Malia sent us.
In the 10th arc of Pale, Wellbow gave to me 10 thrilling chapters, 9 sad backstories, a ton of Garrick finders, 7 grinning children, several drunken teens, 5 dogs of war, 4 nightmare dreams, 3 bell traps, 2 familiars, and 1 cherry poppin' clams murder truck.
Was that in this chapter?
But yeah, so
Fools. The April Fools chapter was here, was it?
Far Cry 14.12 takes place in this arc. Yeah,
that was a good one. That was the highlight of the story, I think.
Yeah. It was so funny how it kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Just sorry to talk on Malia's song as a whole as well, because like Malia and Jenny we had on for our Arc 10 reflecting, which is funny because remember we told them not to start their podcast till Pale finished.
Is that right?
Yeah, now they're in the final arc of Pact, so
wow.
That was bad advice. I'm glad they didn't follow. But yeah, that was when Arc 10 was when Pale in Comparison started, I think. Crazy long time ago. And yeah, this was the arc without Verona. She was on her beach holiday until the very end of it.
That was good. Good times.
Yeah, and this was that second like interlude arc. Like this was the Kenneth Others arc, and this is where we met Nibble and Chloe for reals. Like where we got, I think it was the Chloe interlude 10.c. We learned a lot about Alpi as she was invading Raph's dreams. Like, and yeah, obviously learning Toad Swallow's backstory and his whole thing about the 8th chord in 10.e, like a huge arc, really. Again, one of those ones where I think a lot of seeds here for stuff that would happen post Arc 13. I would be surprised to learn that Wildbow wasn't planning post Arc 13 stuff when he wrote this one, because this sets up a lot of stuff.
I think the fact that it was 14.12 was what really helped kick off a lot of the it's going to be 13. 13 is going to be the final arc. 13.13 specifically will be the final.
I remember Jay was predicting it even before that, and that was part of
really?
Like and that was part of the thing for me, is because Jay's a lot better at predicting this stuff than I am, and so when 13 seemed at all reasonable with stuff like that. It was a bit like, okay, I'm
Mm.
starting to buy into this theory, which obviously I think Wildbow took advantage of for the community as a whole.
Mm.
Yeah. Speaking of, do we know where Sig is in the story right now? Just like talking about Sig's interlude. What's he up to these days?
Just chilling, you know? I don't know.
Did he fuck off? I mean, you would, but
Sig is going to have his moment. There's going to be a time where, you know, after Teddy takes in more abyssal energy, he's like, oh, I'm going to take up smoking. And then suddenly, Sig, and Sig kills him. It's going to be pivotal.
And then also Cherry Pop will throw her rock at Charles. And do you remember when that was a thing? Do you remember the Cherry Pop's rock talk all the time?
Rock, and how it was almost going to make a difference against Mariska, but didn't. Classic.
Oh, and then people were convinced she was going to use it to stop Master in Arc 13, and Wildbow had her specifically fail, which I think was calling out the people who thought that was how he wanted to end Pale. It's great.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's do Arc 11, Dash to Pieces. Verona settles back into her life in Kennet, and Avery's parents reveal that they're separating. Then, with help from the Sable, the trial of Edith James begins, with all three Kenneteers rocking up to Matt and Edith's house and locking her in the basement. That basement has seen a lot of prisoners by now. Yeah, things get pretty personal in this trial. The Sable locks Edith in a box for a bit. But yeah, eventually, they confirm she's guilty, and Toady is elected as her replacement. But then the shit hits the fan because it turns out Edith was keeping all of the spirits and echoes in town from chucking a tanty, and they stopped doing not that. So anyway, after getting that all sorted, where Verona buys just a fuckload of water bottles.
That's right, the expensive water bottles. Classic Verona moment.
But yeah, each of the Kenneteers takes a day off after that night, which I just wanted to call out because I still think it's funny. Like, Verona goes and hangs with Jeremy, great idea. Avery Skypes with Liberty, love it. Lucy goes and trains with Guillerme. Because even back then, she didn't know how to take a day off. And in fact, they almost die to some weird thing in the sky before Gashwad comes and saves them. This is also the arc where Verona tries and fails to tutor Declan. And also where she starts playing Alchemist somewhat seriously, and she discovers anti-smoke, which she's going to use a lot in this story. Then the arc sort of finishes off with the Kenneteers preparing to challenge Marisica, and so they lean into their worst selves, becoming the goat, snake, and wolf, their alternate masks. They end up capturing Sig. They almost get Liz, and they think they've got Marcy, but as we learn in her interlude, 11.z, they did not.
That's not Marcy. You're in trouble. Yeah, good times.
I remember we knew that, but the Kenneteers didn't going into Arc 12. It was so fun.
That was a fun few days between Arc 11 and 12 when we knew that they were not in as good a spot as they thought they were.
And like, all that stuff, like the goat, the snake, and the wolf, they're alternative selves. Like, I think Avery's the only one who still really uses hers, but I love those as their kind of Kennet below masks. Like, so much cool stuff.
Yeah.
Declan, that was fun. He's such a little shit. Marisica's whole interlude, obviously coming off the back of 23.z, I think 11.z, like learning Marisica's backstory was hugely important at the time. In general, I think this is an arc that I would get a lot out of on a revisit post the end of the whole story. Like, all the stuff with the Sable imprisoning Edith, like there was a lot of interesting jurisdictional and political stuff that I think was really on theme for Pale that may have gone over my head at the time. The anti-self masks are a great lead into Undercity concepts. Like, I think Arc 11 establishes a lot of stuff that we wouldn't appreciate being in the story until Arc 14 and after.
Yeah. Should we get into Arc 12? False moves. The trial of Marisica, except, whoops, no, it's not. It's Phinia. It's going pretty badly until the Kenneteers enter Goblin mode, which was, OED's word of the year that year. So the Kenneteers were really on top of it. Cherry Pop and Peckasnot.
Sorry, I think it was actually their word of the year after this game.
Well, they probably stole it from the Kenneteers. Anyway, Cherry Pop and Peckasnot team up and almost beat Marcy with the power of shitty little goblins. Then Lucy goes on a date with Wallace to see Gabe's new movie. Now, I don't get that reference.
No, they go and they saw the movie and Gabe was in it, and Lucy got in a real bad mood.
Oh my god, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that's crazy. Anyway, We enter Sig's dream, Nibble's dream, Charles's dream, and in Charles's dream, he admits that he's guilty. Avery steals some of his shit, and they all go to meet at his house, leaving Snowdrop to cover for them. Things go a bit off the rails when the witch hunters arrive alongside Mussa. Avery saves Raquel from Cleo and then loses to Verona in a battle of magical item bingo before we round out the arc seeing Reed Mussa's POV as it all goes wrong.
Well, wrong for him.
Well, yes.
God, yeah. I still don't know how I feel about Avery stealing all of Charles's shit. I feel like that was an argument at the time of the fandom. And I never really
It's
felt
been
satisfied.
retroactively justified at the very least.
That's fair. Also, I love that bit where they leave Snowdrop with Jasmine to cover for Verona and Lucy. We actually got that called out like an arc ago, where Jasmine was like, "Man, that was weird. That must have been one of the fetches." I was like, "No, even worse, it was Snowdrop."
Yeah, good stuff.
The Witch Hunter interlude, huge. Love that
Yeah.
chapter.
Yeah, the witch hunters again.
Yeah.
Folks that I wish we saw we're going to see more of or had seen more of, I guess.
Yeah, like this is why I am or was at least excited for Plex, because I think there's so much more room
Yes.
to play with Aware that this story
Well,
hasn't been able to do. Because
maybe it will now. We'll see.
that's true. Maybe it's
Yeah.
not no longer for Plexing, but I guess like the Witch Hunters and Sergeant Hall have both felt extremely underutilized in this story, all things considered, and which is always such a weird thing to say about a 3.5 million word web serial. It's not like it's been holding out on us, but I'd Aware of something I just want to see so much more of, and so whether it's this story or Plex or whatever, I'm keen to hopefully one day get that. Also, Cherry Pop's interlude 12.A. Don't worry, Cherry Pop, I've still got your back. The Witch Hunter interlude should have been called 12.B. I will die on this hill.
Was it 12.A? Wasn't it just 12A?
Yeah, Cherry Pop's was 12A, and then the Witch Hunter one was
Yeah.
12.A, whereas it should have been 12.B.
Why?
Just because Cherry Pops doesn't have a dot in it doesn't mean she doesn't count.
It wasn't 12.A. It was 12A. It was a different thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't
No,
an
because
interlude.
just because it doesn't have the dot, it doesn't mean she doesn't get her own letter.
No,
This is my point.
I don't think so.
She still
I
deserves
think-
her own letter.
Yeah, it was an interlude.
No, yeah, I know it was an interlude, not an interlude. That still doesn't stop my point. It still counted, and she still should have been
I don't think it
getting her
does.
own letter.
I don't think
You're
it
all wrong,
counts.
and I know I've been arguing this for 2 years. I will not let it go. 40i or 40i2. I'm never letting this go ever.
Anyway.
This is where Kippos answered the discussion question too. Kippos wanted to call out Snowdrop's Tiny Fans documents, and I put this in Arc 12 because Arc 12 is when we had STF on as a reflecting guest. But yeah, Kippos was just calling out, like, that document was huge as far as community stuff went. Like, it was ginormous. It was so well cited and researched. Like,
Yeah.
she had every day. I wouldn't be surprised to learn that Wildbow started using it at one point to clarify what he had and hadn't done. Like, it was so good. And then, since then, STF, I still use her Negateer one. I've used her Pisces one to check other people's theories. Like, her documents have been a huge boon to the community.
Yeah, definitely. Here we are, the end of the story, Elliot. Arc 13. And what a bulky arc it was. It opens with the Carmine Alcazars. Verona sees how she rose to power. Lucy is challenged to make some decisions, and Avery sees that Miss let the Carmine die. Zed, Bree, and Jess have dinner at the Kellys. So that was a fun moment. I remember that. It's good times.
One of those things where I was like, I remember that happening. I would not have guessed it was in Arc 13. Like,
Yeah. Thinking of Arc 13, what we really think about is the countdown to the comet, right? Everything starts to go hectic. Verona and Lucy are fighting each other as much as they fight the witch hunters, and we see how David is trying to help Verona's home life, but not really doing much. Avery fights some sexy animals, tells Toadie that she's leaving Kennet, and negotiates with the Garricks for a promenade solve that Miss gave her. We meet Freakin' Squeak. Oh, tragic. Oh, no, wait, sorry. Freakin' Squeak is still alive. I was thinking of the vice principal, but...
same diff.
Freakin' Squeak.
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to go, because, as you sort of have been touching on, this is an arc with 3 acts. Like, it starts with the Alcazars, then goes into the countdown phase, and then there's the actual fight.
The break,
But just before we get to the fight at the end of this second act, like, I remember this was really the time where you started going, I think this is the final arc, but it couldn't be. And then, like, so many great moments in it. Like, the fauna ephemera, like, meeting them and seeing Avery fight them was great. The Garrick negotiation, like, just, it was such a hype arc. That's the thing I think nobody reading the story not live is ever going to recapture. It's just how hype arc 13 was when you thought it could be the last one.
Yeah, it was incredibly hype, wasn't it? Especially when it ended, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, we enter the final day. Ray lets Charles and Seth escape. John goes on a farewell tour and eventually beats down Lucy in a battle of let me suicide myself. The Kennedys struggle to stay in sync and fail to keep the witch hunters out of the contest, then fail to keep Charles and Yalda's ring out as well. Verona hurts her hand, desperate to try and make a difference, and ends up not. Inside, the doe is still shit at her job, including overseeing fair contests, and we watch as all the contestants fail, including, of course, tragically, our boy, Breastbiter. And out comes, clothed in red, the Carmine shitlord.
And yeah, just like Tommy B answered our discussion question and pulled out this moment, like just being in the community live at the end of Arc 13 was crazy. Like there were arguments about whether the story was ending, whether we were getting epilogues. I remember as Copium, I came up with the idea of like semi-epilogues to try and explain how it could possibly be the end.
Yeah.
Like then the realization that we were still going when Arc 14 started.
Yeah, what a moment it was. Oh.
Yeah.
I remember when I read the chapter and I was like, Elliot, you have to read the chapter. We have to record something right now. And I think you read it and then we recorded something immediately that night. And that was, of course, our summer breakdown.
Yeah.
It was just such a good time, wasn't it?
Summer Breakdown is like one of the episodes that I actually push on to people. Like when you see somebody on the Reddit who's like just starting Pale, or they're like, "Oh, I just hit Arc 13, that was crazy." I'm like, "This is actually an episode of our show you should listen to." I'm fine with people who don't listen to the show at all, but this is the one episode that I would happily push on people.
Yeah, it was really just a perfect time capsule of that moment, wasn't it? In a way that is
that whole
I think
vibe.
we talked about it at the time.
Yeah.
Or like it's going to be impossible for people to reread the story and really get this same vibe.
Yeah, like I think anybody who starts the story now is going to see from the table of contents that Arc 13 isn't the end, and they're not going to feel it. And like, so that episode is the thing I'm by far the proudest of in this story, just because it allows people to experience that vicariously, hopefully.
Yeah.
Like I think we've talked in the past about when the show ends. Like, I think I want to like reorganize this podcast feed because we're getting on like 200 episodes, and I think it's too big a backlog for anybody binging the story to be interested in, and like. I want to reduce this feed down to just the reflecting episodes, but I'd leave Summer Breakdown in there for sure. Like, I think that one's even more important than any of the reflecting episodes.
Yeah. Yeah, it really was. I remember because obviously, I guess part of it that made it so impactful for the two of us specifically was we were planning the live stream and we
still are.
Put in no, but I mean like actively planning it and putting in logistical effort into. Okay, it seems like the story is about to end. Of course, we'll never quite know for sure, but it seems like it is.
Well, no, remember I fucking 4D chessed myself in the face because Wildbow sent us.
We did have an indication that the story wasn't going to end yet.
Well, not an outright one. Wildbow just like did something that we'd asked him to do and sent us the thing, and just because he did it like right around the start of Arc 13, I was like, okay, Ruben, I think Wildbow's sending us a subtle signal that the story is ending. Meanwhile, he had actually asked us earlier if we wanted to know this thing, and we'd said no. So, like, we kind of did have a chance.
To be clear, Wildbow had offered to tell us if the story was going to be ending, and we said no, we want to continue to experience it fresh.
And then I thought he was playing 4D chess, and subtly, I thought he was fairly, like a fae, hinting to us that it was ending. It was like, no, that was just my goblin-ass self trying to interpret fairy shit where there wasn't. So I was convinced the story was ending because I thought Wildbow had given us a subtle signal that it was, and I made that up.
But it really was just like, and so we had been kind of planning, and it was like, no, this, like, both the kind of dawning horror of being like, this can't be how the story can end. You know what I mean? Like, when we were getting towards the end of Arc 13 and being like, is this actually going to be it? There's so many dangling threads. And then the horror of wait, no, John's dead. Like, what? Like, this can't be it. And being like, is that it? Like, what the heck? It was so,
Yeah.
it was really once in a lifetime, wasn't it?
And I remember like talking to you, not on the podcast, but being like, this ending feels kind of rushed. Like there are threads we're not resolving. Like this part of Avery's story, and there were so many parts where I was like, I'm a little disappointed in this as an ending, to be honest. And it was like one of those things in retrospect. It's like
Well,
that
yeah.
was the fucking clue. Like
I think if John had won and the story had ended there, I think it would have been a really disappointing ending.
Yeah,
right? On
yeah,
reflection, and that's what makes it so good. Is it's like, oh wait, what? John's dead? Like, oh fuck, like what? It really was just so. Oh god, it was so.
Well, and I
good.
was just sitting there, and I was like, I don't feel like we're resolving any of the Kenneteers character arcs
any
here.
Of the
like
thematic.
Like so much stuff wasn't being resolved, and I was like, I mean, it's fine, but like, you know, did Walbo bite off more than he can chew? It was like, no, we just, yeah. Yeah. And so, to be clear, Walbo is clarifying what he had asked us was, did we want to know something that might disrupt our schedule? Because I think at the time he was still considering taking a break after Arc 13, which I maintain would have been funny, but I think the community would have ruined it because everybody would have been too freaked out.
Yeah, and wasn't there a thought about having Arc 13 be the end of Pale, but then kind of being there being a sequel story? I think there were a few different ideas that Walbo was throwing around for a while.
But it was like, I guess Walbo did just ask us, do we want to know something vague about it? And we sort of said, no, keep the surprise going. And then obviously we ate those words.
No, I mean, I would never, like, I don't regret for a second
decision.
because we got to experience the sheer power of Summer Break. And it really was just exceptional.
The closest I come to a regret around Summer Break stuff is there's definitely All Packed Up 2 stuff that I don't like anymore because it was too like Blue Heron centric, and like totally. I kind of wish we'd done an All Packed Up mini at the end of Arc 13. If I'd known there was going to be like another 2 years of story, I would have been like, let's just do a mini one.
Totally.
And done those segments that I think I'm just going to have to can now because it's like, you know, nobody wants to do trivia on Blue Heron students they haven't talked to for 2.5 years.
Who's your dear again? I don't care. Totally.
I also want to call out, so as well as Tommy's answer for this arc, we also got a bird sent in a moment per Kenneteer, and I'm including all of a bird's answers here just because the main one was they submitted like this fan art of Lucy and John when they had the showdown where Lucy erected her arena of a battle of wills and John still beat her. And like there's a great fan art of it. If you haven't seen it, like search the Reddit, it's fantastic. But yeah, a bird also called out their favorite Avery moment is when the trail comic in 2.9, just sort of what the fuck moment, and the first Walbo comic, like great moment. And then they also shared STF's answer of Verona with the furs in 9.9 being their favorite Verona moment. Also, they did throw in an honorable mention to Brett's house burning down because
the classic prediction.
Well, that's Bird's claim to fame. Yeah.
Arc 14 Fallout, and a great God, I remember still reading Fallout 14.1 and being like, oh my god. Like the fucking roller coaster of emotions. Anyway, the gang's recovering. Avery leaves to go to Thunder Bay, where she and Snowdrop meet the council and Thunder Bay. She also meets Janine and Nora and Frankie and the goat. The goat, of course, Florin, the greatest. Back in Kennet, Verona is coping by diving headfirst into the new Undercity. She meets her BFF forever, Mal, her other friend, the VP, and starts to establish herself as a local bruiser. She also starts using a fetch just for a while, just to skip a class or two. It'll be fine.
Yeah, it's a temporary thing.
Yeah. Lucy is really struggling in the wake of the unjust loss here, but comes to realize that the fight isn't over yet. But the arc wraps up with us meeting local nice guy Basil as he joins Muss's crusade. He becomes a lord, but Rook teaches him that he's gone a bridge too far. Great one.
God, remember, like, this is one of those things, the Undercity, I had such a different opinion on in Arc 14 than I do now. And I mean, that's because, Verona and stuff have fixed it. But, like, I still Yeah, like thinking about like, was it a good thing that Verona dived headfirst into the Undercity like she did? Part of me still really wants to say no, even though clearly
Yeah,
it fucking
totally.
worked.
Yeah.
But just like it's crazy to think that all of the Undercity people only joined the story at this point. Like,
Mm.
yeah, and all of Thunder Bay. Like Arc 14 doubled the cast of characters. Yeah,
Yeah.
very short arc, but
Mm,
is one of the ones I remember the most vividly again.
yeah.
Like I could tell you what happens in every single one of the 7 chapters in this arc, whereas Summer Break kind of blurs. Arc 15 and 16 for some reason I'm really shit on, but Arc
Yeah.
14, like beat by beat, I could probably like remember 80% of it.
Did we meet the Mr. Mouse, Mr. Trenchcoat Mouse by this
I
point?
think he got mentions. I think he
Yeah,
got
good
mentions
on
in Arc
him.
14.
What
Yeah.
a character. From the community, Asta Freak talked about Snowdrop's introduction of Avery at the Thunder Bay Council, which I think,
Yeah.
we started to see a lot more of Snowdrop introducing Avery, or Snowdrop interacting with new practitioners around here, and Avery having to be like, it's opposite. She does opposites, which was always very funny. Yeah.
And that was where we were like, I remember the fucking red flags around Florin in this meeting too, because he was like the one, he was super friendly, and he was the one who got Snowdrop's thing and was like having a ball, and then it was like, oh, and I'm a puppeteer, that's my practice. It was like, you can't trust this man.
It was so good meeting all of the Thunder Bay folks, and like, Florin the puppeteer, and like I can't remember what Otis's actual, like a Black Forest trapper or something, but
yeah, which is a spin-off of a gingerbread something or other,
a gingerbread witch or whatever, and like finding out about that and being like, oh my god, what does that mean? Like, it was so fun. I mean, it's always fun meeting new practitioners and others, and this obviously chapter had a bunch of it, which was delightful.
And I think, I think Wildbow called this out as a thing he was explicitly doing at the time, but it was also great. Like Thunder Bay represented a normal practitioner landscape. Like, so it was really cool kind of having one of our characters really deep dive into like a version of what normal in this world looks like as we, the arc ends with us learning about Moss's conquest plan. And we've just sort of spent this arc establishing what we can assume most of the rest of the province looks like. So that was like sort of a really fun thing, as well as as much of work as being done in the Undercity, Thunder Bay is just as important. And Thunder Bay is one of those things where I'm like, I kind of find myself hoping we're going to see more of Thunder Bay at this point in the story. Like I'm hoping they're coming back in some regard, because like Gilkey was obviously a big presence recently, but some of the other characters from there, like I just feel like we haven't seen as much of it in terms of being practitioners. Although I'm saying that now, I can't think of any prominent examples, so maybe I'm just wrong.
Yeah.
But I guess a lot of them have popped up every now and then. There just hasn't been like a big Thunder Bay with the Lord like unit feeling like they've ever like mobilized. Thea and Otis I want to see more of, actually. They're the good example. I want more Thea and Otis in the finale.
Yeah, totally. For sure. Yeah, I mean, Avery's starting to call in favors, so maybe we'll see something from... I always feel like Otis was a pretty good chiller, so maybe he'll come in and convince Thea to come along too.
Yeah.
So Arc 15, Playing a Part, another very funny punny arc title. Wallace is leaving town for a bit, so Lucy says goodbye and meets Bracken before being swept up in a trip with Team Smells Bad to go and capture Marlin. This fails, and she ends up with the family man. Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, my God. This escalates into a war for the heart of the Undercity as the Bitter Street Witch helps Kenneth shut down the Fam Bam Man. He tries invading the Kennetiers' school, but is castrated in more ways than one. Verona ditches her dad, but runs into Edith berating Matthew, so is that pros, cons, kind of a lateral move. She then goes to Thunder Bay to hang out with Avery, and the two play around in Thea's Mario 64 levels before robbing her blind.
Yeah, and just an arc like kind of a lot of in between stuff, but so good. Like the Family Man fight is iconic. Like Lucy in the school fighting Family Man, huge, and obviously robbing Thea's vault, classic.
Yeah, that was a good moment for sure. God, lots of good moments fighting against Thea, huh? I guess was this the arc where they fought I can't remember what his name was, but the ornithologist.
Ornithologist,
Yeah.
yes.
That was a classic.
That was the main Mario 64 level.
Yeah. Great stuff.
Yeah, like, I think this was because Verona and Avery have called out more explicitly recently that like when they team up, that's the Kenneth found vibes, the lost vibes,
Yeah.
and so this was the arc where they spent most of it together, and so of course it's the playing a part arc because it's them having a fun little adventure, in some magical paintings and robbing a vault. Like it sounds like the sort of thing that might have happened at the start of the story. Whereas meanwhile, Lucy's fucking battling to the death with the family man, which is also very her. Like a lot of fun stuff in this arc for sure. I kind of wish we'd had like the Lucy goes and hangs out in Thunder Bay equivalent. And obviously we get a lot of the Lucy and Verona in the Undercity stuff. So that was really, I think maybe the combo we lost was Lucy and Avery as a combo.
Yeah, totally. Smart Guy C109 on Reddit talks about their favorite part from this arc, which was Rook's statement about Lucy to the family man, saying, "Conquerors her age have taken whole tracts of the human world, or have otherwise changed the course of history. Queens and kings younger than her have ruled. Not every youth is capable of such things, but the 3 practitioners of Kennet are of that caliber and character." Which is a real badass quote. I know,
yeah,
so good.
I love Rook. Remember when Rook was cool?
More if she did something.
It's like we had this window. Rook was introduced as a bad guy. Then at the end of Arc 10, we learned that she was really cool. And then it was until Charles at the end of Arc 17, I guess, that she was cool. So we had 7 arcs where Rook was cool.
Well, do you remember there was that bit where she was like perched on a fucking telephone pole outside Lucy's
that's Arc
house
9.
or something? Like,
it's the first chapter we see her.
Bits. Yeah, and now she's just kind of sipping tea with Hollow Yen and doing her manipulations.
Back then, we wanted her to be backing off, but she kept interfering. Now we want her to fucking do something. And where is she?
She just never does what we want, does she?
Which I respect that, to be honest.
Yeah, classic Dony.
But yeah. God. Again, like speaking of things I want to figure out in the finale of the story or whatever, like I want Thunder Bay to come back whenever we do the finale, and I want Rook to either get dunked on or do something. Either way, I don't care. Yeah. Cool. Well, Arc 16, Left in the Dust. Kennet and the Undercity start to like merge their councils. Like this is where we really see the Undercity start to get taken seriously by Kennet above.
Well, it's because they've got a proper new leader in Stu Mullen by now, right?
No, I think it's still the foreman at this point.
Oh,
actually, he's not there yet. Yeah,
Stu comes in.
Yeah.
Anyway.
In fact, I think the foreman, now that the family man is gone, the foreman is actually the biggest sticking point to making this deal hard because it's like him, the Bitter Street Witch, and the vice principal.
But I remember the foreman doesn't last very long from that point.
No, I think it is this arc because we'll get there. But yeah, anyway, this is also where we see Toady runs his first market. Like Liberty comes and visits. But yeah, what else happens this arc? Lucy and Verona visit their prisoner Marlon, who's living in Chloe and Nibble's bathroom.
Yeah, but getting to experience Chloe playing house, which is delightful. So
yeah,
who's really the prisoner here?
Well, no, Marlon didn't appreciate. I remember that being really insulted on Chloe's behalf.
Yeah, of course.
By how unappreciative Marlon was of her prison. But yeah, so then this is where the Kenneteers start to talk to Miss and the rest of Kennet about their plan to basically add a 3rd layer of town to this whole mess. They negotiate with... They negotiate with Liz, and then also Charles and Edith and Mariska are there, but mostly with Liz to kind of get some peace and stability, and they make Liz put up a statue of John. Then the next chunk of the arc is basically Verona's domain ritual. She clears out some squatters, she beats the family man again, the family man kills the foreman in the process, and then she deals with some shit from the judges, including some milkmaid victim roleplay. Then she does the Kennet above part of her ritual. Anthem's her only real challenger, but they get him to back off by getting America to tell him to. In Thunder Bay for this arc, I've just kind of put this one separately. Avery stalks Tomas Witt and meets the A-What guy.
Right.
She helps the Tearaway kid reunite with his girlfriend.
With his lost love, yeah.
Yep. And this is where Liberty comes to visit. She puts like the pressures on Nora, and then Liberty, Avery, and Jude all go to the build-up path, which is where Avery learns that Liberty has in fact been hitting on her the whole time. But Liberty helps her get together with Nora finally. Then
Yay.
Avery shuts down Florin's coup and leaves him trapped on a path.
Yeah, Doe takes king, was it?
Yeah.
Classic moments.
Some dorky shit. And then the arc rounds out with a pair of interludes. We get the Millie legendary one where we learn that her family is cool but not really. And then there's one surrounding all of the boogs. So we meet like the new hotness, the Turtle Queen. There's also the Type Tap Kitty. Another one I've forgotten. But yeah, basically Kenneth captures a bunch of
It's
women
the one
and
who's
children.
like the countdown Cassandra, isn't it?
Yes, that was it. Yeah, nailed it. Anyway, the chapter ends with Kenneth capturing a bunch of women and children as prisoners.
Classic stuff. Yeah.
This arc also included the final extra material, 100 Years Lost, which
sad.
I mean, if you're going to go out,
but yeah, what a one to go out on, eh?
I mean, the thing is, it was the last one, but we're still talking about it. So, like, maybe Wildbow's just saving the next extra material for when people get over 100 Years Lost, and he's just but like we never have.
The next extra material will be 200 Years Lost, and it's not coming for a while.
We were talking about it before we started recording. I mean, I'm very invested in 100 Years Lost right now because I got 3 spoonfuls of Brilk writing on whether I'm right about
Pisces theory, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, Arc 17, another big arc. At the start of it, the Kenneteers decide to hold the council to account. Toadie is dropped, and Louise is now the head of Kennet above. Verona settles into her domain and finds out her fetch is starting to become sentient. Lucy ups her training with Guillerme and starts seeing Bubble on the side. Bubble Yum is what we think they're called for now. Avery hangs out with Thea and Otis, fighting off flesh munglers before returning home for the Kelly family Christmas. Matt starts his own domain claim because, hey, why not? Everyone else is doing it. Then we get into the heads of some Muss's foot soldiers as they start to enter the town. We have Elizabeth Driscoll, who is quite nice but doesn't really get it. Eloise has given up on nice and just looks out for herself. And then we have Sin, who is very cool and quite expensive. And then Milo, who murders people and takes their powers like a fucking shitty Sylar. But anyway, this is when we did All Packed Up 1.5. That was fun.
Yeah. That was the Brilk, the origins of Brilk being a real thing.
The third phase of the arc, we get the full-on invasion. Mussa starts a lordship claim. Lucy is dueling people left, right, and center. Alpi and Verona are annoying people in their dreams, including one nice lady they convinced to defect. Avery helps Miss get set up in the stuck-in place and then leaves to meet with dinner with her dad, which is then crashed by America. And whoops, turns out the parents are becoming the Awarents. Well, almost all the parents, obviously not
all the important ones.
Parents. Yeah. And Kenneth found the moon cracks and Kenneth found appears. But yeah, so as an epilogue to this arc, we then step into the heads of 3 key and important members of Mussa's contingent. Mussa, Y, and Easton are all in a competition for who is the biggest Mussa fanboy. It's tight. It's tight. Who's it going to be? Is Mussa so narcissistic, or does Easton want to suck his dick more? I don't know. Anyway, they cope with the fallout of Kenneth found, and then Charles makes a move.
I think this was the longest arc by a fair margin. It was there were 4 acts to this arc. There was all the council stuff and Matt doing his domain claim. Then there's Moss's invasion. Then there's like the full-on part of the invasion. And then there's like that epilogue. Like it was a crazy arc. Somehow I only realized as you were reading that out, we totally forgot to talk about as well as when they convince that nice lady to defect, Lucy also kind of manages to get Mr. Martin to go soft on her.
Yes, spider
in the spirit
breather,
world.
Hell yeah.
Lucy has a moment
breathers.
Lucy has a moment with the spider breather, which is important because like arachnophobia is like the one fear she has. Like Lucy is fucking insane, but spiders are like the one thing she's not about.
Yeah. But all she needs is to meet a nice spider breather and then that'll start to turn around, hey? Or
how old was the spider? There's a spider breather boy at the Blue Heron, I think.
Wasn't he the one who was friends with the hot girl totem carver? Is that right?
Oh, I think he was, yeah. There was some great theory in the community that was like some guy was not the son of the guy they thought or something. It was like that.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It was like Soul and his best friend, they were actually half brothers or something, and there was like a great conspiracy theory that I totally bought into at the time.
Yeah. Good times.
God, that was great. we got a bunch of answers,
Yeah, a lot of people had their favorite moments in this arc, hey?
which I think is fair. Like arc 17 and 13 are the big ones.
Well, let me start with Shmee001, who called out Easton. This was the real peak Easton arc, right? God, yeah. I mean, the classic line is, "I'd love to become a girl and marry someone like Musa." Wait, why are you looking at me like that?
Yeah, I think Verona's response to him saying that was just like, "Man, there's a lot to unpack there."
Yeah.
But
Do
like,
some
blah, blah.
introspection, man, and that's
Yeah.
that's what he's doing. We haven't seen him since, I guess.
Mm.
He's been introspecting
No,
this whole time.
We have seen him a few more times, and he's been a complete fucking dunce every single one of them. Speed Chuck chimed in for this one too, and was he basically said that the awarening of the families and also the friends in Arc 23 is the highlight of the story for them.
Yeah,
Like the Kennett families and friends have made themselves a strong part of the narrative right from the start, and they deserve to be completely sidelined. Basically, Speed Chuck, I'm heavily condensing what was a very lengthy answer, but basically Speed Chuck was talking about how this is a trope that often doesn't work, but has felt natural for Pale to do since the start, because the families and friends have always actually been characters.
yeah,
And it would have felt even weirder if they didn't get involved at some point.
yeah. I mean, it really was like we need to talk about the girls back in arc 5 or 6 or whatever it was, and
7,
yeah, and so having the hey, wait, like the parents in this story about magical children are actually gonna exist and not just kind of be something that bullies the kids in the first few chapters, and then they get to go off to magic school and they never have to have parents again. I think them becoming aware is like, oh no, like it's happening, like big time, it's happening in a way that was so exciting and has really paid off, I think.
Yeah, but I kind of agree with Speed Chuck. Like, it's a trope that usually frustrates me in these sorts of stories, like whether it's superhero or urban fantasy. And like Speed Chuck was really focused on how Pales made it felt natural by having them be real characters the whole time. And he said a bunch of other stuff, but it was like I completely agree. And like he sort of rounded it out by saying the parental relationships in Pale have always been the most compelling part of the story for me. And so they're mixing them in with what is the best magic system in all of fiction is just chef's kiss.
Yeah.
And honestly, I just agree with that sentiment wholeheartedly. I think we've talked about it in recent weeks, but it's kind of like, like Charles' War is neat, but like, give me that Sylvia and Jasmine shit. Like.
Yeah, I will never get tired of Connor, Kelsey, and Jasmine as characters.
Yeah.
They're all so fun.
Well, and Sylvia's in, like slotting in as a fourth fun.
Sylvia's
like
becoming more and more of a playing a role, which is also great.
Yeah. And Brett is continuing to not play a role.
Yep, and that's also great. Yep. I want to call out Zitith's answer as well to this, talking about Killwagon, loving Killwagon, just a boogeyman who wants to go fast, and I mean, whoops to that, but hopefully he'll be back eventually.
Yeah, I agree. Like, because I definitely built up an image of boogeymen as less people, I guess, which stupid thing to do in Pale, because that's like the whole point of this story has been ramming home that that's not what you should do. But Killwagon kind of actually just came into the story and presented a way for boogeymen to work and not be terrible, and that was awesome. And then he's just fucking cool.
Yeah.
To Sarwat, I loved they pulled out the quote that has stuck with them the most, and like they consider the biggest theme of Pale is when Lucy said to Chloe, "What are we saving if not the chance to back each other up like this?" Which I think is when Lucy gave her like the jacket.
Yeah.
And again, just such a small, minor character moment that I agree with Tasawa lives in my head rent free. Like, and this is the strength of Pale is, the need for acts of love, the importance of small things, prioritizing empathy and solidarity. That's what Kennett's all about. And this whole chapter is full of it. Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And then the final one we had for Arc 17 was from the Arabic 8, which is, of course, one of the peak moments from this chapter. The wall, the magical wall.
Oh, I'm so glad somebody pulled that out. Because oh no is so good. I mean, the magical wall being a thing that is introduced and then goes fucking off the wall, I guess, it's just great. It's so fucking funny. Well, it's still the most powerful thing we've seen in the whole fucking story, right? Like this, nobody else saw Charles and Marissa coming except this wall.
Except this
And
magic wall. Yeah.
This wall spends the whole chapter being like, guys, oh no. And they're like, Kenneth Found comes, and the wall's still saying, oh no. And they're like,
Wait, that
what?
wasn't it? Yeah.
And it was the same for us as readers. We thought that was all of it. Oh, so good.
Very,
Yeah,
very
the
good.
wall needs to make a comeback.
Best character in the story. Yeah.
Yeah, so then we've got Arc 18, which I just wanted to call out. We sort of haven't talked about it, but like this story has a number of like, I'd call them recovery arcs after major ones. Like Arc 14 was a big one.
Downtime arc kind of vibe.
Yeah, downtime feels harsh though, because
No,
they
you're right,
usually
you're
still have
right.
stuff. Yeah. But like Arc 8 was another one, like after the Blue Heron headmasters got deheaded.
Yeah.
And like Arc 18 is like kind of one of these in my head too, even if it's maybe got a little bit more action than Arc 14 and 8. But yeah, like Wild Abandon kicks off. We've just created Kenneth Found. We've gotten Muster to fuck off. But we're settling into Charles's new normal. We learn how bad things are now that Charles owns all these lordships and is basically just turning the magical half of the province upside down. And most importantly, most of Muster's force is stuck in Kennet too, while Muster just fucked off without them. They all start causing some trouble, but the Garricks get the good ones out, and you know the rest take care of America. Verona also has to start part 3 of her domain claim now that Kennet Found has been found. Charles chats with the Kenneteers about how they don't need to be enemies, and Jasmine and I think Connor and Kelsey are there for that too, which was fun. Edith gets part of Matthew's house, but it's a rocky reunion. Lucy has Liberty and some of the goblins over for dinner. Biscuit drugs a bunch of people, and Muster's forces are finally subsumed when Lucy, with help, stops Anthem from being a dick anymore and locks him up in Kennet Found. In Thunder Bay, Avery discovers the secret of the goatiest goat that ever goated.
That's right.
And yeah, there were a bunch of interludes in this arc. So early in this arc, I skipped over. There's the Lunar Hare, Bitterstreet Witch, Dom Driscoll arc, where we see all 3 of them get born.
Oh, the intro, the recurring intros showing how weird, culminating in the, you know, the like I don't know what you call it, insemination.
Yeah, the conception.
Conception, that's the one. Such a good and effective beat by Wildbow. One of the highlights to me of like clever writing in this story, I think.
Well, yeah, and because Arc 17 ends with Kennet Found being founded, and so it's like really Arc 18 is the first one to sort of get to say, okay, like, you know, the number everything is 3s in this story, like more or less. And it wasn't until Arc 18 that we actually had Kennet Found, with which Wildbow could then sort of introduce us to his concept of the 3 Kennets. And, you know, we obviously, well, I in particular use that model for pretty much everything I'm looking at the story through now. Is it found, below, or above? And I think, you know, considering like the second chapter after Kennet Found gets founded is this interlude that reminds us all 3 of them are stupid in their own way.
Yeah.
And birth is dumb regardless of how you do it.
Strange in a very tangible way. Yeah.
Like that's such a strong way to sort of really establish this trinity that's going to become super important to the balance of what Kennet stands for, what the story stands for. Yeah. We also had the Biscuit interlude in this arc, which obviously huge fan of. Best living goblin. We got the Anthem interlude in this one, which was huge at the time. Anthem's backstory still breaks me thinking about it.
Yeah, fucking tragic.
I'm
glad he's on the right side now. I'm glad he's found his way.
Anthem is someone I have unashamedly just completely 180'd on. Like he spent like a week in Kennet Found.
Yeah, I loved him the whole way through.
Oh, but it was like he was problematic. It was like, but he was that classic. He was that classic Ted thing. Him and America both had that thing where it was like, you would be really cool if you would just stop doing this one thing that I hate about you. And then he just stopped doing it. But I kind of instantly forgave him. Whereas like every time he talks to Miss in like Arc 20 and stuff, and Miss is like, "You killed a lot of my people. I'm still not okay with you." I'm like, "Oh, but you know, he's good now, Miss. Like, shut up. Like, you know, yeah, he did a bunch of murders, but it's fine. Like, you know, quit holding a grudge." Which is completely unfair and hypocritical of me, but I just stan Anthem so fucking hard. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, and we also get the Liz interlude to round out Arc 18, which is where we just really want the depths of her patheticness. Sorry, and no, there's actually one more. There's one more interlude I forgot in Arc 18, which is the final one, which travels to a lot of people, but it's mostly the one where Zed and Bree go into that lordship that turns things into places, and the Kenneteers' clothing gets turned into little versions of themselves. Do you remember that one? Great. I just love that one conceptually still. Like, yeah, great.
Yeah, yeah. So Arc 19, we have Crossed with Silver. Verona is really leaning into the house on Half Street, being her halfway home. Avery runs some paths with her dad and lets him be a very cool and very competent dragon, and then meets the witch hunters and Clem. Lucy steps up her training, works with the dog tags to stop an escaped video game boss, which leads her and Verona to discover what we call at the time the St. Victor's kids, but of course now know as the Negateers. I mean, I guess they're not all from St. Victor's anymore, right? But yeah,
I think they still are.
They still are?
Yeah.
Anyway, they capture one to interrogate. Verona has her dream market idea. Avery goes shopping with Nora and then goes to the fair markets. Verona makes a lord with Charles, which is fun, just hanging out and making a problem for Mussa to deal with.
It was actually like, and again, this is one of those ones where I was like, man, that was the moment I remember Verona and Charles making that lord together. I was like, oh my God, I think Verona is Charles's best friend. And that was only like 4 arcs ago. Like, because I don't think Verona's going to let them be friends anymore after what he pulled last arc. But it's like crazy. This was only in arc 19. This is like 2 weeks ago in story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow, you're right. It was actually very recent, wasn't it? Avery meets with Raquel and a secret band of female establishment defectors, and also learns that there's a mole in the Garrick family. Lucy, Verona, and Taddy deal with the wild hunt that's also come to town and get pretty fucked up by them, especially Lucy. Luckily, Mussa comes back to finish his lordship claim, and after a brief test by the Kenneteers and judges, gets completely excommunicated by Durocher. The Kenneteers make a deal with the Wild Hunt, spelling war with Charles. And finally, our arc ends with a look at Ryan through his interlude.
Which, again, what was that personal question? I already talked about that in this episode. Still, that Ryan interlude, that one lives rent-free in my head because I feel unresolved. Yeah, Arc 19 was crazy. I did not remember it being so long and this much happening in it, but it contained a lot. Like the Wild Hunt only showed up halfway through the arc. I'd forgotten there was the first half with like the Father Gobar escaping. This was when the Kenneteers found out the Negateers existed. I had forgotten it took this long for us to even know they were a thing. Like, yeah, crazy arc.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'll move us straight into Arc 20 then. Let slip. Avery solves the promenade. This is, I think, Arc 10 and Arc 20 both open with Avery doing some hot shit on the promenade. Yeah, unfortunately, when she solves it, we see what's behind the door, and that just raises more questions. It does give her a really cool boon, though. She uses that to, explore some more paths. She makes a new friend who speaks Punjabi. She rescues Raquel from a marriage by getting her to forswear herself and then having Charles fix it. And then she accidentally makes Sheridan aware and throws Rowan in for the hell of it. She's not willing to make Nora aware, though, so Nora kind of dumps her. It's a little unclear and weighs heavy on her for quite a while. Meanwhile, back in Kennet, Lucy and Verona are preparing for their big New Year's party. We meet the newly named Juliet, and Verona is really leaning into being like, I don't know, her devil bookseller thing. I forget what the term for it is. This is that thing, where she goes, Alpi takes her to like deep in the ruins and there's like giant pipes and shit. And then she does like a cool ritual. Anyway, things kind of pivot in this arc though and go sideways when we learn that the Negateers are about to attack the Belanger compound, which is, where we start getting some Negateer interludes. We meet Nomi, we meet Freeman, and we meet Kira Lynn, who are all different levels of sympathetic. At the Bellinger compound fight, we also meet Jen, who's a really cool mum, and Jillian, who is a cool augur going on horror augur. Then the arc is rounded out with a Gillette interlude where we learn what makes her tick, and she almost dies as the surgery of Edith James goes extremely sideways.
Yeah, yikes. The surgery of Edith, what a chapter. Oh, it was really where it started to go horribly, horribly wrong, wasn't it?
Oh, that was where we met, this is for the first time Kira Lynn started dabbling in her drug of choice, the Abyss.
Yeah, yikes. And as we see, that's not going to lead to good things for the the Negatiers, or the
Oh, I mean,
Kennetiers, to be honest.
seems to be doing. The concerning thing is, it seems to be doing fine for Kira Lynn. This is exactly the sort of shit she wants. Like, that's the worst part.
Yeah.
I forgot that we had the Freeman interlude in this arc. That was a classic. Nomi's interlude was great. Kira Lynn's was great, but in the way that I hate her. Meeting the Bellinger compound and seeing why Alexander was the way he was also a great highlight for Arc 20. It was sort of like, Alexander could have been a lot worse coming out of this hellhole.
Yeah. Yeah, Alexander, not such a bad guy, huh?
Yeah.
Arc 21, in absentia, the Kennetiers are on the run. They're lurking on some paths, they fuck up the Garrick's HQ, crash Lucy's grandparents' place, and finally settle in at Liberty's after fucking with all their other friends. They make plans to, and then do, kill the Alabaster, distracting Charles with a quick huzzah.
Huzzah.
Thank you. After an interlude to go over the effects of de-deerening 1.0 featuring the Bjorgman. God, what a run-on sentence that was. Nicolette, Jen, and Charles, the Kennetiers, hang out with... Sorry. This sentence is just such a mess. Let's start it again. After an interlude to go over the effects of de-deerening 1.0 featuring the Bjorgman, Nicolette, Jen, and Charles, the Kennetiers hang out with Zed and Bree, who eats the big computer man.
Look, I wrote these very last minute. Okay?
Turns out Kenneth is not doing so hot, so they rush into their Aurum killing plan. Uh-oh, the Aurum's not the only one who's going to get killed. The Kennetiers weaponize their feelings of not measuring up. As Avery raises an army, Verona concocts a big slapdash plan, and Lucy organizes a moot. Unfortunately, Ryan was ready and cedes his ground, leading to Avery getting overconfident. Luckily, the sword moot goes pretty well.
Yeah, and like, I loved the part of this arc that was the conversations around killing the Alabaster. I thought that was like, it's the sort of thing I think Pale has really excelled at, is like moral, like tackling moral problems like that pretty head on.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's definitely the kind of thing that it does well. I mean, yeah, the conversation about did they kill the Alabaster or did the Alabaster just kill themselves using them as a tool?
Yeah,
was always quite a funny one.
Oh yeah, that was one of my favorite things Mrs. ever said. Like, you know, Lucy's like, she killed herself. It was like, yeah, but at your hand. It's like, yeah, fair. And yeah, the fucking sword moot, classic stuff. I mean, Anne Went being cool, you love to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, the sword moot was great. I think so. Yeah, Vice Versailles called out the sword moot as their highlight. Yeah, I mean, like Lucy during the sword moot specifically was just exceptional, right? But then, of course, the fight between Mussa, who was Mussa's teammate again? I can't remember.
Grayson Henniger.
That's right. And then Anthem and Lucy kind of smoking and blasting the arena, and like, yeah God, so good. Lucy using her choking powers for the first time, was it? I guess.
As Vice Versailles, like, she calls out, this is one of those fights that's just dripping with so many layers of symbolism, and she wrote more than we're going to talk about here because this was another quite long answer, and in fact, she's offered/threatened to write an even longer one, and I told her to put it on the Reddit, so hopefully she does, and go read it if she does, but it's like, there was so much to this fight, like the way Anthem was the sorcerer who wanted his kids to be combat sorcerers and kind of found that in Lucy, the girl who, you know, moves through father figures, you know, like there's no one's business. My favorite little bit of symbolism was like Grayson enters this fight because he won't shut up and he's talking toxic bullshit, and Lucy literally takes his ability to scream away because it's like screaming is both his combat way of getting power and, you know, his way of disrupting the moot, and she takes both away. Loved it. Like, I absolutely agree. This is a fight that should be right up there on people's lists because it had so much powerful imagery behind it. Beleg Tal also wrote in for this one, just to toot their own horn a bit, but there was a fan meetup coinciding with when the Kennetiers went to Ottawa in the story. So in real life, a bunch of Wobbo fans living in that region all went over to Ottawa and hung out. And, you know, I think that eventually led to Beleg Tal and Tommy starting Twigging onto Twig. So definitely a good thing to do.
Yeah. So yeah, then we get to arc 22, Hard Pass. Is this where we are introduced to Team Never Passes as a name? When did that name come in?
I think it was earlier, but I think we don't see them again in this arc because Avery ain't in it.
Mm.
And I think we learnt their name a little bit before it, unfortunately.
Okay, never mind. Anyway, so yeah, arc 22, Hard Pass. Lucy and Verona meet up and debrief, trying to desperately convince themselves Avery isn't dead. And then they kind of decide Avery's not dead. And hey, she's not, so it all worked out. Lucy starts living in a foundling hotel and meets Toadie's crew in the new goblin Gunk. She then takes out her anger on the Negatiers in their dreams, which is very funny, them fucking with the Negatiers. We get Helen's cool backstory as she names herself after another horrifying Wild Boar character that Elliot doesn't know much about. But Helen can't be as good a fit as Verona. Sorry, but can't be as good a fit as Victoria Dallin.
You butchered my joke, Ruben.
Sorry. The war in Canada. Yeah, I guess it's a classic Wild Boar trope, the horrifying monster ladies with too many limbs. The war in Kennet escalates. Buildings are burned down, including Brett's house. Well done, Bird. A final stand in Marcy's new church goes pretty well until, out of nowhere, it's the Doe. Oh, coming in with the magnet.
But yeah, this was the Avery-less arc, and I think with that in mind, it's surprising how it doesn't live in my head as a particularly grim arc. Like Avery is usually the positive upbeat. She's our path practitioner, right? Like I would expect the Avery-less arc to be particularly downer, but it kind of wasn't. Like Verona and Lucy carried her energy well enough that it didn't feel like a downer arc.
Yeah, they did, didn't they? They did well.
Also, this was an arc that in my head will always be the one where the banner art really stepped up in how Wildbow experimented with using it. Like, we've skipped over like the story up until now had just been using the banner art to, I think the most interesting thing that had been done with it at this point was like when the Kenneteers weren't in each other's anymore. But Hard Pass started to use it mid-chapter to like signify the way Verona was thinking about stuff, and yeah, like lots of cool uses of banner art in this arc.
Yeah.
So
I guess
community.
I'll call out Hobo Demons first because we kind of already made reference to it. Hobo Demon loves horrification a lot, and they said, and not just because horrific Wild Boar characters called Helen are their jam.
I gotta fucking read Twig.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great podcast you can.
I know. I just don't have time.
I also want to call out this great quote from Hobo Demon's ads that they said, "Yes, please, give me them wacky fractal dactyls," which I just thought was beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I hate the Kims on a level because I don't know how to fit them into like my otherverse like theories on how everything's put together. But aside from that, they're so fucking cool. I mean, we talked about it in this chapter. Their teleportation is awful, and I love it. Everything about their practice is just a new level of depraved nonsense that makes me go, "Why are you doing this?" Like, I'd much rather eat spiders.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we also got a comment from Speed Chuck who wanted to call out Freeman as their character who stuck out in the story the most to them and wouldn't be in other people's top 10. And they included it in this arc because obviously this is where we lose Freeman. And that was kind of Speed Chuck's point is that Freeman's death is kind of overshadowed by Avery's. And his whole thing was kind of pitiful. Like, he accomplished nothing. He did even less than John did in his death. Like, John got all his friends remade. Like, Freeman didn't deserve much, but he deserved more than he got, was Speed Chuck's quote. And yeah, like, kind of keep forgetting Freeman's even dead, to be honest, which I think proves Speed Chuck's point. Like, he was just there and then he wasn't. He didn't do anything, but he was really developed as a character. Like,
he was instrumental in Turtle Queen's arrival, and Turtle Queen's pretty important.
No, that was Basil, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, sorry, you're right. I've got him mixed up. Yep, never mind.
I mean, but you're proving Speed Chuck's point because nobody even fucking remembers Freeman.
Yeah,
like but like he had his own interlude. And then we also got the whole thing with his backstory where Guillermo was on the phone with him and Lucy. Like there was a lot there, and he just died in a way that, is tragic. So yeah, R.I.P. Freeman.
Yeah.
What was he called for a while? Freak with a PH.
Yeah, Freak. But yeah, so Arc 23, the penultimate arc, Go for the Throat. We see the backstory of how Avery pulled off her sick hockey moves of fucking with Marcy, and then step into her mum's head as the Awareness make a play. The Kenneteers adapt to their new limits and begin to cook a plan. And also, hey, Avery and Nora are probably doing okay. Lucy visits the Sable and it goes pretty well. She gets a new job offer to be the Carmine, but she rejects it for some reason. The war begins, and we see it first from Cameron's perspective, who's a bit of a dunce, and then Mal's perspective, who is definitely a bit of a dunce, given that she is gone by the end of the chapter. What a loser. The Kenneteers try to start doing their plan, but before realizing what Charles is doing and kind of scrambling to stop it. They succeed, they kill the family man, and they do get a small start on the big plan, but Jasmine thinks that's it, so they need to step back. But yeah, they aware in a lot of people, including their classmates. Back at the war, though, Charles seals the deal, but Marcy, unfortunately, does not.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about this arc pretty recently, so I don't feel too much need to dive into it. Great arc.
How about this, Elliot? Charles seals the deal, but Marcy is dealed with a seal.
But, yeah, I like it. Oh yeah, I just I'm so excited to see more of Jasmine and this Awareness stuff.
Oh yeah,
this is the thread from Arc 23.
I mean, Sylvia for sure. I'm so
Oh,
keen to see what happens with Sylvia now.
I like all the rest of the Awarening stuff is good. Like, obviously, I'm hotly anticipating. I assume the next Avery chapter is going to deal with Nora, because like Nora has to be a part of this, and Arc 23, as you just said, is where Avery and Nora kind of rekindle stuff. But I feel like Nora, like Arc 23, I think this plan for the Awarening, the going for the throat, was Avery's, and I have to believe that Nora was a part of the genesis of that plan in her head, because remember, it was a whole thing a couple of arcs ago where she was trying to figure out how to be in a relationship with Nora while not telling her the truth about her life, and the Garricks were offering to help her. And we had a discussion question where we were kind of trying to figure out how you can even be in a relationship with that kind of like asymmetrical dynamic, and nobody really had a good answer. And apparently Avery agrees, because she's concocted this entire plan.
Yeah.
But yeah. Oh yeah. And did you mention the part they killed the family man?
Yeah, I mentioned
Good
that.
riddance.
Yeah, good riddance.
Yeah.
He can see his family in hell.
But yeah, okay, so I'll finish this off then. Arc 24, finish off. I didn't do that on purpose, I swear I'm just an idiot. It's the final arc of Pale. Charles is defeated, and everybody but Ramjam lives happily ever after. That's all we know about Arc 24 so far.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like saying I think this is the final arc, but like, fuck, we've been down that road before, right? Like, so I don't know. We'll see. Good story though. That took a while, but that's Pale.
That's it. Pale. And there we go.
Yeah, I just we touched on it when we were doing the first handful of arcs, but like, you can really see how big the Kenneteers' journeys have been in this story. Like, I don't think I'd realized quite how far they'd come until I really laid it all out in a row, like over 15 pages or whatever it was. And yeah, like, I'm excited to see how they deal with those. I feel like this has helped me get a better picture for what they're dealing with in the finale question mark here. I'm excited to dive into it.
Yeah. And that's it. I mean, any other final thoughts, Elliot, before we wrap up?
No, I just do want to reemphasize to everyone, like, we're going away for a couple of weeks, so this is your last. Yeah. I mean, we've left you with a long ass episode.
This will tide you over a nice solid 3 hours.
If it doesn't, we will be publishing some Deep Impact. Basically, the discussion question for this week is: go read Pact if you haven't already. We ran that survey a couple of weeks ago, asking people whether they've read Pact, and basically it was like 95% were yes. So, like, with that in mind, that's probably going to affect how careful we are about Pact spoilers and something like All Packed Up 2 when we're 30 hours in. So now that Pale is producing less chapters per week, now that we're taking a break, this is your time to get started on Pact.
Yeah, time to catch up. The story's probably maybe almost ending. I don't know, maybe. So get into it.
And I mean, either way, even if you're following with Pale in comparison, at this point, you're still probably going to beat us. So,
Yeah.
But
So
we'll be back on. Yeah, we'll be back on what, the 28th or something?
Yeah,
It's crazy.
something like
We'll be
that. A
be
few
gone for a
weeks.
while.
Yeah. So catch you then, folks. But if you're looking for Pale content from us in the interim, rest assured we will be posting a hot and fresh new Pale meme every single day, even while we're away. So make sure you check out our Twitter at Pale Reflect Cast.
Yep, head to the Doof website, doofmedia.com, to see the other shows that are on there while we're taking a break.
Yeah, and if you want to support some of the shows on the Duff Media Network, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Duff Media. You get all kinds of bonus content, bonus shows, all kinds of great things by supporting on there. So go do it.
Yeah. And Wildbow's Patreon is patreon.com/Wildbow. As you can see, it just took us 2 hours to do what I would consider the briefest possible summary of this fucking story.
Yeah.
So you owe him for this marvelous story.
Everything that he's put into it. So yeah, go do that, and we'll see you in a few weeks, folks.
See you, everybody.